Okay, we are live. Hey, how's everybody doing? I have with me Rich Cooper and Rian Stone, my very special guests, who I don't get to see all that very often.
But welcome to Rule Zero, everybody.
Yeah, welcome to Rule Zero. So I wanted to let me explain really quickly why Pat's not here. Pat has has vocal issues. Like if you heard me talking to him on Friday, I actually had to pipe up an hour early. Because he was having, I don't know, something. He's got, I don't want to say he's got strep throat, but he's got something. And so he is not with us today. And actually, he is not doing his show tomorrow. So it sounds serious. But anyways, he will be back, I'm sure, sometime later in the week. I don't know what everybody's holiday schedule is, but mine is a little bit wacky right now. I am going to be doing an interview with Abu American on Wednesday, which I think will be a really fun interview. That's going to be based in Religion in the Red Pill. So I'm going to bill that as a Religion in the Red Pill show. And for those of you who don't know, are you guys familiar with Abu American?
Dude, the more I talk to him, the more I like the guy.
He's a good dude. He's a really good dude. And I've been waiting for a while to talk to the right guy about Islam. And I see you, Sean. Hang on one second. About Islam and the red pill and everything. And I'm just was waiting for the right guy to come along, and I think he's the guy. So I'll be talking to him on Wednesday. And lo and behold, I have Dr. Sean T. Smith.
Hey, Sean.
Smith.
What's up, gentlemen?
Hey, that's a shiny new mic. Look at that.
This is the old one. It's
is that?
Yeah, it's a noisy Sunday at my house. So I had to rig up something in the guest room here real quick. But
everybody was giving me grief about my sound. Actually, the reason why it was so jacked up for the last like 2 or 3 episodes is because StreamYard changed the hardware inputs for this latest update of the beta. And so
is that why my audio was so loud the other day?
Yes. Yes. Okay. And so you have to actually do it like before you jump in, just for everybody's personal edification here, before you jump in on a StreamYard, it's always good to go and look at like what your mic is set to and what your video is set to, because now they're in 2 separate little dialog boxes. And I didn't realize that mine was set to the audio that was on my iMac here. So something to keep in mind. I just I wanted to Sean, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me
on such short notice too. And I wasn't even planning on doing. I think this is just sort of my like throw together show today, because I don't have Pat, and so all of my Red Pill 10 or my Rational Male 101 stuff just sort of went out the window. And so I hit up Ryan, and Ryan said, "Yeah, I'll come on." And then Rich said, and you did. And I think
I was shopping for tiles. I would have done anything at that point.
So we're just going to play fast and loose today. I might go 90 minutes. I might go 2 hours. We'll see how it goes. But I had planned on talking about issues of respect. And then Sean came up with this really interesting tweet today. And I thought, you know what, this kind of like locks in with what I was going to get into. I'm writing actually a fairly lengthy essay on me reconsidering respect. I've written about respect between men and women in the past. I think I've got at least 2 different essays on it, but I haven't like revisited it in a while. And I've been having some like sort of different thoughts. And every time like people will say, well, how can you keep writing about new stuff? Well, sometimes, you come back to things and you realize, your initial take on something that you wrote back in like 2009, maybe you have new information, or maybe you have something to really, think differently about later on in the future. So what Sean was talking about today is he was talking about loyalty, and that kind of locked in with respect and honor and duty and all of this great kind of virtuous stuff that I was going to talk to Ryan about today. So Sean, why don't you let everybody know what your tweet was about, as far as like what inspired it, I guess, is maybe a good way to start.
There's a backstory to the tweet that I put out today. And the tweet that I put out was asking guys in the red pill community, how do you account for loyalty in women? And I was essentially challenging guys, don't use hypergamy as an answer. I want to know if you think loyalty exists. And I knew that it was going to turn into a discussion about hypergamy. And that was fine. And let me tell you what I've been wrestling with here for the last few weeks. I've been wrestling with this video script. And Rollo, I was going to bounce it off of you at one point when I got a little further along. But what I'm struggling with is I get the red pill definition of hypergamy, which is not strictly in accordance with the original definition of hypergamy, which is fine. It doesn't need to be, but the original hypergamy definition was came out of as far as I know, a census that was taken in 1880 by a guy who was looking at Hindu caste system societies, and he needed a word for when a family tries to increase or level up in the caste system by marrying their daughter to somebody at a higher level. So he came up with the word hypergamy, which makes sense. So originally it was a word that described a factor at the beginning of a relationship. And what I've seen in the red pill community, and I've done quite a bit of reading on this, is that hypergamy becomes a factor in the beginning, the end, the middle, and the end of the relationship. And that's quite a conceptual jump to go from the beginning to the end. Hypergamy defines the beginning to hypergamy defines the end. And so what I've been wrestling with is that I don't necessarily disagree with anything I read about hypergamy, particularly from you, Rollo. I think you're pretty thoughtful about it. Some guys out there that I'm digging up for the video are not real thoughtful.
I constantly have to play catch up for these guys.
Yeah. So I'm wrestling with the fact that, this makes sense to me. But at the same time, I work with a lot of couples for the last 15 years, and I see a lot of, I get the dirty details about divorces and affairs and so forth. And I cannot think of a single time when hypergamy seems like a relevant variable in the demise of a relationship. And I know that some of the red pill guys out there are going to say, well, hypergamy is there, you just can't see it because you ate the wrong color pill. It's fine, whatever.
Yeah, that's an easy answer.
I'm not a mind reader, so I can only go with the data that's in front of me. And the data contradicts what I see in the red pill community, even though I agree largely with what I see in the red pill community. So that's really what I'm wrestling with. And that's what the tweet was about today. And it turned to quite an interesting discussion, and I think I'm glad, a good faith discussion.
Yeah, that's what I was just about to say. I'm glad you said good faith there, because I think you got a lot of really high quality for Twitter. You got a lot of high quality responses to that.
Well, I got high quality people that follow me, so
makes sense. That is true.
Oh, fluff in the audience.
Yeah,
that's content creator. I like it.
Well, I think probably I've wanted to do a dedicated episode to misconceptions on hypergamy, and I think I sent you that one post that I've written about it. I'm always trying to play catch up here, because because people, when they talk about hypergamy, they throw it at me. They say, that's all Rollover talks about is hypergamy this and hypergamy that. And I'm like, well, that's because it's the basis of a lot of different things, particularly
is it fair to say, Rollo, that you essentially own the term hypergamy?
I wish I could say I did, but for a while I did. If you go and you type hypergamy into Google, my site will show up as on the first page, I'm pretty sure. And if it's not, it's only because I've sort of backed up off of it for a while now. Well, here's the thing is, I in my first book, and I believe in my third book, I talk about
Rollo, you're getting pushed down by seeking arrangements.
Seeking arrangements? Oh, good.
Hypergamy is defined on Seeking Arrangements now, way ahead of you, also on Wikipedia and Urban Dictionary.
Those two are Hack Spirit site.
Yeah, and then you're in like 5th place now. Oh, dude, you're losing traction.
Well, if I'm losing to Wikipedia and Urban Dictionary, well then, I'll claim innocence. But I've talked about this before with respect to like what the original definition of hypergamy was. Yes, I know that. I'm aware of the analysis or whatever it was. Actually, there's been some other one.
It doesn't matter to some degree. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it was okay. So it was as convenient a term to define a concept as remember. I didn't come up with hypergamy. Right. This was like way back in like my SOSWAV days, like back in 2004, 2005, when we started talking about this. And hypergamy that was the most common refutation, I guess, of hypergamy was that doesn't mean what you think it does. It's the official dictionary reason is this, right? It's the caste system. It was sociological. It was people want to say it was a psychological term. No, it wasn't. It was actually anthropological for a while. Was what was used.
It was literally invented in a census.
Yes. And so but it makes sense. And I can remember when I was applying a lot of what I was learning about like ovulatory shift out of Evo Psych, even Evo Bio, and I think I sent you the link to the book Promiscuity by Tim Burkhead. It's used in there as well. And I think that the definition of hypergamy has been expanded. And that's I would like to think I was at least in some way responsible for that, because for a while I was using it fairly regularly. That's why I was ranked for Google. But then I think it was when Jordan Peterson went on Joe Rogan, and he actually used the term hypergamy, and he used it in the sense of like how we use it in the red pill. And so he was saying, alpha seed, beta need. I'm being the nice way of saying that. And I thought, wow, finally, a major player is actually using this term in its expanded sense. So first off, I think the biggest misconception, particularly I would say in your area here, is that a lot of people seem to only focus on the beta buck side of hypergamy, but there's two sides to it. Okay, there's the alpha fuck side and there's the beta buck side. And so what a lot of people do is they say, well, you can point out and say, well, when the guy lost his job, then the wife lost interest and she divorced him. We can see that and we go, oh man, that's really messed up. And we want to put like our ideas of like what's right and wrong into hypergamy. And that's why you get people like Glow or these other guys who want to turn the red pill into an ideology. Whereas like I'm saying, look, it's there, it exists, and it's not just one-sided. So if most guys will say, well, it's about job, it's about affluence, it's about status, it's about provisioning, which is all what I would say falls onto the beta buck side of hypergamy. What they don't like to focus on is the alpha fuck side, where it's like the guy has to have a V-tape or he has to have a six-pack abs. So like that side of hypergamy is all the Tinder side of hypergamy. And so there's two sides of it right there. So like a guy who, I should say, when I'm talking about it, I mean it in its total sense, like alpha seed and beta need. So when a woman is looking for to balance, say, reproductive interests with provisioning interests, that's what I mean when I say balancing or optimizing hypergamy, finding the hottest guy, the sexy son's guy that she wants to reproduce with, who also happens to have has status, maybe fame, has pre-selection, is a good provider, is parentally invested, all of these things that would make for that complete package. Now the thing I've been talking about for a very long time is that women don't even really look for that in one individual guy anymore. They're only looking for it like alpha seed in one side and beta need in the other side right now, and never the two shall meet. Now, if they did, it would be great, but that's my definition of hypergamy, which is alpha seed and beta need. So we have to understand what it is that we're talking about when it comes to hypergamy. Now, the other side of this was the loyalty side that you're talking about. And I don't necessarily think that loyalty precludes hypergamy. So if you say, well, this woman right here was loyal to this guy right here, and he lost his job and she still stuck it out with him, or it was some really tough times, or it was for better or worse, or she took her marriage vows seriously, and so now that has to in some way is refutation of hypergamy as you guys are talking about it. And I would always say that the only reason they got to that point in the first place was because he had to at least in some way check off some boxes on that hypergamy checklist for her to want to be loyal to that guy. And I think I also said this to you as well, is that when it comes to loyalty, when it comes to duty, honor, trust, love, all that good stuff that goes along with it, a lot of that is still rooted in the fact that that guy had to, at least in some way, check off some of those boxes. That's why I call the hypergamous filter. There's a
lot of either or thinking in every online community, and loyalty and hypergamy, it doesn't seem like an either or. It seems like both things could.
Well,
I guess you have to define the term loyalty. I would define it as a willingness to stick around through times that are uncomfortable and challenging,
or to stay, invested, I think, in the relationship, right? At least you can, when I was going to talk about respect and loyalty and honor and stuff, I was going to sort of frame that in terms of how it affects men and how there's a sort of a different definition or different understanding or concept that men have of respect that women do not share, but they have their own concept of respect. It's like, what are we defining as terms for like loyalty? Is it just like not cheating on your husband, or is it being invested in that relationship, till death do us part, regardless, unconditionally? And I think the unconditional part is where people kind of get thrown off, because if a woman is is disloyal, right? What is it that brought her to being disloyal? And I've said this in the past, is that there used to be social institutions, there still are right now. There used to be social institutions. There's religion. There's being raised by your family has different values. Could be your culture. There's a lot of different buffers against hypergamy, or the worst of that. And I think I put it out to you this way, was like, for men, our natural innate drive is unlimited access to unlimited sexuality. It's that want. That's why pornography is such a big deal, right? Because we want it. It grants us access, at least virtual access, to having having unfettered access to unlimited sexuality and unlimited variety, basically. So that if that's that case, we're taught as young as like 5 years old to be in control of that, to stay on top of that. It's because if we don't, we can get ourselves into a lot of trouble. If you're banging your friend's wife, that might get you into trouble. There's buffers against like the worst aspects of our innate mating strategies. Well, for women, I would say that yes, there are definitely buffers against that, and I think that's what throws off a lot of guys who are critics of mine on the MGTOW side or the black pill side, because they give up on relationships and marriage, and they basically give up on women.
Give up.
Yeah,
it's their
because
decision.
well, and then this is what they say, and I can understand why this would be frustrating to somebody, particularly in your line of work, Sean, is that when people say, I just want to have anything to do with it, I'm just going to get a doll. It's easier to just do that. And they're basing that decision on this idea that women are all hypergamous, and as soon as she finds the next better guy, she's going to offload me and get onto this other guy, right? And so they use that as sort of a rationale not to better themselves, not to be any better than they were, not to engage with women. And it's almost like, and you're right, it's almost like this self-defeating process, because they say that, hoes ain't loyal. And so I get it. I understand why this is a thing, but I would also argue that like hypergamy is not a straitjacket. It's not something that is, it's always on, but it's not that women can't be in control of it. I just think that they are in less control of it now after the sexual revolution than they used to be before.
Mind if I take a stab at this one too, Rollo?
Yeah, go ahead. Please do.
So, Sean, I think I did some tweets in response to yours too. I think it's neat. So we obviously talk about this is a praxeology, not an ideology or any of that crap. So being as such, it doesn't have to be true. Now, if it's true, it's better. And I'm sure you've had that experience in your practice, correct me if I'm wrong, where you kind of know what is going on with the person psychologically, but you kind of have to tell them something slightly different in order to get the result that you want from them. Is that a fair example of sometimes that's happened in your practice? Or
that I know what's going on in the situation?
Yeah, like let's say it's the guy has a problem with a certain disorder or a certain proclivity to a certain behavior. And, if you just describe that, he'll just like shrug it off. But you kind of have to dance around and say something that's not necessarily true, but it's effective to get him to behave in a healthier way mentally.
I get where you're saying. I never say anything untrue to my clients. But
Bad choice
I
of
hear
words.
what you're
Just
saying.
get what I'm saying,
I
right?
understand what you're saying, that sometimes I will not have to confront something directly because it's just going to shut down the conversation. That's true. Yeah.
So with this praxeology, I told this to Ed Lattimore back when we all met back in 2017, 2018, where if I could tell a guy the moon was made out of cheese, he worked out 3 days a week and ate healthy, then as far as I'm concerned, the red pill praxeology says moon's made of cheese. A lot of times it's not about what's true in a scientific rigor sense, because we can't have that. Human beings are complex. You're always going to find exceptions. So you have to take the center of the bell curve and find stuff that works good enough. It doesn't have to be the best. It just has to be something that works better when what's there now. And hypergamy, the way we've defined it, for better or worse, suggests that women will shoot for the best option for them. They always want the best. And they're willing to, and everything comes out of it. So as a guy, when you hear that, what do you think? Okay, that means if we're married and I'm her best option, then if I just sit around eating Cheetos all day and getting fat, I cease to become her best option. She's going to move on, which means obviously you got to keep putting in the work. It's like Rich says, you put in the work. So it doesn't matter to me and a lot of the red pill guys so much whether it's true, but is it useful? And I think that's where the praxeology thing really stands out. It doesn't have to have scientific rigor behind it. It doesn't have to have 5 researches. It doesn't have to have a p-value of what's it, 0.02 or
That'd be good. 0.05 is pretty typical.
there's the one. So 0.05. All it has to be is if, for the most part, if a guy sees it, understands what it's trying to accomplish, and then takes action that betters his life, so much the better. Now, obviously, being more accurate and more objective than not is a better thing, but I know there's going to be some cases where we're going to hit something that, and women talk about this all the time, where, yeah, we're describing the behaviors well, but we often attribute what's inside of her mind when she comes to this conclusion, which they almost universally say we get wrong. And I'm fine with that. I don't really care what's in her head as long as she acts right. And then to answer the question on loyalty, well, hypergamy is perfectly in sync with it. If you're her best option, she's going to be fiercely loyal to you for as long as you become her best option. And like you said, there's nuance, there's the cost sunk fallacy, there's ego investment. Girl hates you when you tell her she's wrong. So if she says, this is my best man, and you argue with her, she's probably going to fight to stick with him even harder. They're people just like anybody. And so I don't think, and Rollo's right. Black pill guys, MGTOWs, they all get it wrong. They treat it as like, well, nobody typed the Contra code into my life, so I'm never going to get a woman because I have to do something to earn it. Like, heaven forbid. But then you understand, oh, okay, well, and I think, Rollo, you have an article, The Safety Net. I love that article. Next to Saving the Best, it's my favorite for this exact moment, because if a guy gets cheated on, if a guy's wife leaves, if Karen takes the kids, you know the whole thing. And I'm sure a bunch of your clients are those guys that are going through a divorce and they've had their identity as the father of the children and the provider and bring her home with the bacon. That can psychologically damage a guy. But if you understand hypergamy and the way it's defined here, oh, okay, so she found a better option. She's not mine. It's just my turn. All these pithy little comments. It's a sort of psychological safety net. It gives some assurances to the guy that, okay, the universe is working as intended. She just found better. Don't take it personally. It's just your turn. Now, whether that's true or not is irrelevant. Well, not irrelevant, but it's not as important, I don't think, as it encourages the guys to make the right decisions to get a good outcome and cushions them from the blow of the more damaging aspects of male and female relations. If that makes sense. It's obviously not a scientifically rigorous argument, but I find it's the one that tends to be the most useful.
Yeah, it makes sense and it's helpful. And one of the things I'm thinking about is comparing what's going on in the red pill, well, to the extent that something's going on in the red pill, you know, anything's going on. But comparing it to what my profession has gone through, this replication crisis that my profession has suffered very publicly and very embarrassingly on one hand. On the other hand, is kind of a shining moment for the social sciences because they're catching it and they're correcting it. And that's a difficult thing to do. But it's useful information that I'm getting here. It's helping me sort things out. But well, first of all, define praxeology for me.
I think of it like I use metaphor. Hope you don't mind. It's auto mechanics. It's not physics. I want to put an engine together. How do I get to do that? Here's an instruction manual of ways that you generally put engines
Chilton
together.
Manual. Yes.
Yeah, Chilton manual. Sure, your Honda might be different than the Ferrari, than Rich's R8, but in general, engines are put together this way. And for the most part, if you follow this, you'll be able to put an engine together. Whether you want to put that engine in a boat or in a car, that's up to you.
Okay.
So it's not a what you should want. It's more so how are the best ways to ensure you get as close to that goal as you can.
All right. So help me out with this question. Where the red pill community points toward hypergamy essentially as the end of a relationship. It causes the end of relationships, right? Because when you fall out of grace, like an employee that falls out of grace, you're fired. Doesn't
lights a fire under a guy's ass, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. And I'm not disagreeing with any of this stuff. And okay. I think that
you had a question.
Yeah, I'm kind of rambling at this point. I think I'm rambling a bit, but what the red pill community offers to men is a million times better than what my profession offers to men at this point, which is why I'm so drawn to this community, because actually good work is going on over here. I want to see that it's solid work and not just good work. That's my interest here. But I really get stuck on the fact that when I see relationships fall apart, I can't find the hypergamy. What I find is, well, maybe I do. Maybe you guys would say this is hypergamy, that when somebody leaves a relationship is generally, in my experience, because there's something that they're not getting at home that they need, and they've said it over and over again, usually, maybe not directly, but they say it repeatedly. or they're being abused or that sort of thing. But
well, do you find abusers tend to leave? Because I've seen in my experience growing up the opposite. Girls who put up with all kinds of abuse and for some reason stick around for, like I'll use my mom as an example. 2 marriages. My dad, perfectly good that way, bit of a gambling problem. She left because she didn't like that the kids weren't being taken care of. We were 5 years old. Stepdad, horrible, to the point that we got into like a fist fight when I was 17 over it.
Yeah.
Stuck with him for 20 years.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, to what extent do people actually stick around in more abusive relationships as a form of learned helplessness, as opposed to, like you said, well, he touched me, I'm out of here.
Can I just chime in for a sec? Because I want to share a story, because this might be relevant to what Ryan's talking about and maybe kind of segue into Sean's point. But so I've talked to probably, I mean, I haven't done what Sean's done, but I've talked to about 500 plus guys, coaching one-on-one on various platforms. And there's always some version of this story that comes up. So there was this lady, so I'm going to use a personal example. There's this lady that was very low on the SMV scale, didn't take care of herself, the 2.1 kids, 15 years in a marriage, kids behave pretty badly. The problem with the dude was he had pretty bad depression. He'd lock himself up in his room. He would take off many days from work, had a hard time holding down a job. And all he would do was just sit up there and sulk. And she was really frustrated with it, but she never left him. So she was one of these women that Sean would talk about, where it's like, she'll go through heroic lengths to try to resolve the marriage and save it. And the reason that I see is that there's such a low value for her on the market to leave. She's like, he is the best that she can do, which is why you'll see some of these women go through these heroic lengths. This is my own experience. These women go through these heroic lengths to try to work on these types of marriages that aren't serving them, because they can't do any better. But as soon as they can do better, maybe they improve their SMV, and she goes out to a sales conference with Kevin from sales, and things might spark up from there if there's some value. That's where the whole red pill community will pile and be like, haha, I told you, hypergamy is real, we got you, right? But it's like, it's a footnote sort of thing, right? Like, it's kind of like a placeholder, and there's some kind of blurred lines around that sort of thing. I mean, I know that you're poking at it, and I want to hear where you see it gets it wrong, because you're saying that women will go through these heroic lengths, but they won't leave. But can you say these women are low on the SMV scale? Like, where does that apply to the equation from your experience?
Well, some do leave and some don't leave. They make their own decisions because they have their own agency, but and sometimes they're stuck there for the reasons that Ryan's talking about. It's that learned helplessness. It's habit. It's what they grew up with. It's what they know. It's predictable. There's some payoff to it in some ways. They get a lot of social support and that sort of thing. So being abused, this is not a popular thing to say, but it has an upside to it, which is not. I'm not saying it's a great thing. I'm just saying that there's always
nobody's pro abuse here. Don't worry.
Right. Yeah, I'm not saying this is a good strategy. I'm just saying that everything has contingencies, and some of the contingencies are good and some are bad. But I've met so many couples where it seemed like by the time one of them left, and let's talk about the women. It seemed like by the time the woman left, it's because she had passed a point of utter hopelessness. Like, there's just absolutely no way to put this thing back together. And that's more frequently what I see than what I read about online, which I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I read about online where the woman leaves because things may be getting a little uncomfortable and she sees a better option, so she goes. I see those kinds of stories.
Well, it's not that. We actually say it's
so when they go because of the hopelessness component, where would they be on the SMV scale? Like, are they very low on the bottom, or are we talking about tens here?
I can think of examples of 1 through 10. I don't know any ones and I don't know any tens. I can think of examples of 2s through 8s.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question this way. So what's the tolerance level of a 10 to put up with a lazy, incompetent guy that doesn't chase excellence and sulks through his life versus the one that's a low SMV to tolerate that same level of man?
Yeah, I would guess lower.
Like, is it lower?
I don't know.
It's
I
lower,
would guess
right?
it lower, yeah.
Like, That's the only thing that I can think to apply to the equation beyond what Rollo talks about, because I think that you have to consider the source as well when she's got to make the choice, when she's got to make the decision. Okay, do I go to heroic lengths to try to fix this, or am I going to start, flirting with Kevin from sales now? Right? There's that part of it too.
I think a lot of times when, like, this is not an uncommon like comparison I hear all the time. It's like, well, if she's hot and she's putting up with that, and you can see a distinct imbalance in sexual market value between the woman like higher than the lower guy, people are just dumbfounded by the fact that like someone that hot or somebody who has that much going for them would actually put up with that. And that's when you get, that's why I think a lot of people are a little bit put off by this, because like if you have that situation, and I've dealt with women like that before, like very good looking women who are with these guys, these abusive a-holes who are like, on my scale would be a 4 or a 5, and you're like, wow, why is she hanging out with him? Why is she why is she loyal to that one guy? And then of course there's some sort of mitigating factor in there. Like, is it that because she feels bad about herself? Is it a self-esteem issue? And that's the first thing people will jump to, because that's the easiest way of like sort of diagnosing that whole thing, is like, there must be something going on with her. There must be something, there's something that is short circuiting the logic circuits, I guess, for like sticking it out with this guy. And so you could still say, well, she's an 8.5 or a 9, and she's in a relationship with a guy who's an abusive 5, but she's still sticking with him. What is it about that relationship that is I would say antithetical, but is like not locking in with the idea of hypergamy? Like, so why would she stick around with that? But the fact that we see that imbalance right there, to me anyways, the fact that we would say this would like in any way confuse us is the fact that hypergamy is the natural order. Because otherwise we would have been like, yeah, sure, whatever, and people are just people. And that's another excuse I get. In that case, most people would say that woman is damaged. There's something wrong with her. There's some sort of mitigating thing that's wrong with her that is making her stick with an abusive a-hole. Or maybe, he reminds her of her abusive dad or something, or I don't know, whatever. But we'll try to, fill in the blanks on our own. But the fact that we have to fill in our blanks, to me, says that the operating system is that,
she could do better. Why isn't she?
Yeah. Any woman that does that, that's that hot, why would she be with that guy? That's the only thing. It makes sense because that's what we see is making sense.
And this is a great frame. Oh, sorry, Rich, go ahead first.
Yeah, I was going to hop in. Skeleton.elan said something about loyalty is an illusion. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
It's not unconditional.
Do you think loyalty is an illusion, Sean? I'm just curious as to what your perspective is.
I don't really know I don't know a neat definition for loyalty, because any intelligent person is going to jump ship if the ship is sinking at some point, right? Just how long do you stick around and try to right the ship? And I don't know. Dogs are really loyal. We see loyalty in animals. We see loyalty in chimpanzees. So
I don't know, man. Somebody else starts feeding Hitchens, I'm pretty sure he's going to sleep with them.
We see loyalty, we see devotion in animals, and I see devotion in people, and I see devotion and loyalty in men as being much different than it is.
What do you think of Briffault's law as it ties into loyalty?
Give me the refresher. That man has to bring value or she leaves.
The female in a species is the arbiter of the relationship. When no benefit occurs to the female, no relationship occurs.
There you go.
Depends on the species. With chimpanzees, the males tend to be the gatekeepers, and with us, the gatekeepers of the sex anyway. And with humans,
the divorce stats reflect Briffault's law, because women are leaving marriages 70-80% of the time too, right?
Yeah, they do, but there's some complicating factors in there. The fact that that family court is so weighted in favor of women, that's
I'm sure that encourages them.
That's such a compounding factor that to my mind, without really getting into numbers that I don't have access to, I don't know how to make sense of that.
Well, and that ties into hypergamy too. If a girl thinks you're her best option, the court thing is irrelevant. It's only relevant once you cease to become one. So all it's done is enable the kind of, and for lack of a better word, the kind of beta male that she kind of resents. It gives her, at least, if not a debt, it doesn't deter her from kicking him to the curb and still getting paid. So all it's really done is it's removed the social safety net from low value men. But and here's one quick thing too. When Rollo was talking about like what she's thinking this, what is she thinking that, and you're like this. This is why I don't like these kind of conversations, because it's missing the frame. If you're a guy in the red pill, it's focused on male sexual strategy, and I don't see how. And no offense to anybody here, I'm just talking in generalities because this conversation is not a new one, where they'll pontificate endlessly about what the girl is thinking. Well, why did she stick around? What mitigating factor? Is she damaged? Now, at one point, is any guy actually thinking from the guy's perspective, thinking of the guy as the focal point? And this is what I think is missing when most guys are missing frame. Yeah. They're looking at a relationship, and look at the audience too. The kind of guy who's abusive to his wife is not looking online for how do I get my wife to have sex with me again? Because I guarantee you, he's got emotional roller coasters up and down. It's like that dating a crackhead. Mm-hmm. Sex is great. Beats her one day, buys her flowers. I'm sure you've heard of that 1960s trope that's absolutely horrible. But it's the kind of guy who isn't getting success who's actually looking this up. So we can kind of safely ignore the abusive, hardcore narcissist types because they aren't in this. They aren't looking at this. They aren't building this material. It's not designed for them. And it's not designed for women. It's designed for guys who tend to be on the beta side of the scale, who are missing those extra attractive behaviors. Yeah. Hopefully getting themselves not up to that Ike Turner level of attractiveness, but something a little more legal and ethical, I guess we could say. And then you can't then look at it other than guesswork. We can guess what's in a girl's head. Why does she stick around with this guy when she's hotter than him? She could do better. Who knows? Who cares is my thought on it. That's for a girl's problem for girls to figure out. God knows every legal system and television show out there is designed to make her feel good about whatever she wants to do. But at this point, all we can really focus on the guy's part of it. If the girl thinks you're no longer her best option, well, there's usually a reason for that, and it revolves around too many comfort behaviors and not enough desire-building behaviors. Mm-hmm. Good dick is always better than a good paycheck, at least for longevity.
I've
my
always
experience
said
with people I've talked to.
Well, and then why is that? Because that plays on the dual nature of hypergamy, right? Alpha fucks and beta bucks.
Well, and one of the reasons I'm so drawn to this community is because of what you said there, Ryan, that, okay, look at the APA guidelines for working with women and girls. The focal point is women and girls. The APA guidelines for working with boys and men, the focal point is women and girls.
Oh, yeah. If they were pro-men or at least treated men with adequate compassion or whatever word you want to throw there, we wouldn't be here. Nerds on the internet who are former PUAs were not going to look up this stuff and start studying Evo's site unless there was a massive amount of failures among multiple social organizations that were tasked with the social contract.
Yes, and that is a central point of the script that I'm working on is that this community is actually offering answers.
Yeah, and they're not the best, but it's like outrunning a bear. You don't have to outrun the bear, you just have to outrun your friend.
This is the book you need right here, Promiscuity.
I ordered it on eBay today.
I remember
$40 on Amazon.
Yeah, I know it's bloody expensive. I don't know if it's in print anymore. There's a quote in here that I always kind of come back to when I'm thinking about this, and it says monogamy can occur either because a female chooses to remain faithful to one male or as a consequence of a particular lifestyle. Those are, I think, that sort of sums up just the basis, I think, of loyalty right there.
Right, say it again.
Is it a female? Oh, gosh, now you're gonna make me look it up.
Sorry.
No, it's all right. It's in the very first part. No, it's in the first part of the book. Here, hang on. So monogamy occurs either because a female chooses to remain faithful to one man or to one male, because this is talking about animals here, or as a consequence of a particular lifestyle. So it's not that women can't choose to stay loyal or to be, I guess, fidelity to one guy, or it can be as a result of a lifestyle. And that's why I always say, like, when one of the things that I think a lot of guys, particularly even both sides of the spectrum, get this wrong. I think the MGTOW side, the black pill side, and I know they're not synonymous, but that side of the argument always doesn't, wants to say, well, women will, as soon as they find the next best thing, I'm out of here, and I don't want to get involved in that. Why even try? And then the other side of that is like, well, women can choose to do, or what is it? No, women are the way they are because guys allow them to be that way. Men
which is a factor.
Yeah, which is a factor. So you got those two sides of it. But like when I look at the when I look at the factors that are like mitigate whether a woman is loyal to one guy, because really that's what we're talking about is monogamy, right? Is she staying loyal to that one guy? We can talk about loyalty to family. We could talk about loyalty to children. There's a lot of different ways we can frame loyalty, but I think when we're talking about it from a red pill perspective, it's almost always in respect to monogamy, like staying faithful to that guy till death do us part. Why are those in the average wedding vow? I promise to love, cherish you, forsaking all others, in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, till death do us part. Why is that a vow? Why is that a promise that we need to make? Well, because if we don't have that, if that's not the agreement, if that's not on the table, then that is there in some way to buffer. And I would say for both men and women. So when we're looking at it from the female side, because that's what we're talking about here, we're looking at loyalty from a monogamous perspective. And the last thing I want to say is that that prioritization changes. And if you read my second book, I talk about this in sort of the timeline of women maturing and how they sort of prioritize their needs with respect to alpha fucks and beta bucks as they get older. So when a woman gets to be about like 29 to 31 years old, she's probably looking for someone who she's going to want to get into the long haul with. That's what I call the epiphany phase right there. And so what she prioritizes during that phase of her maturity is different than what she was prioritizing back when she was, say, 22 years old and in her party years and having fun, right? Just like Sheryl Sandberg told her to. So when she gets to be 31, 32, what are her priorities then? What's the guy look like that she's going to stay loyal to at 32? And what does the guy look like who she would be loyal to at 22? And what are those factors that mix those things up? And then maybe when she's 42. So there's a lot of things that go into this, because a lot of guys will say, well, we don't teach women to respect men anymore. We don't teach women to religion. Religion is no longer a buffer against hypergamy. I've said this before. Like, that's why people get upset with me when I say hypergamy doesn't care. I said that, and I put that post out there. I was just sort of a quick hit post that everybody just jumped on and has taken off with since 2012. And the reason I wrote that is because it was either before or after that one post. I wrote it because so many guys were saying, well, Rollo, I don't understand why she cheated on me. I don't understand why she left me. I was the perfect dad. I had a great job. I did the homework with the kids. I invested so much into this relationship, and yet she still betrayed me, right?
Do you see that martyred narcissism in that statement, though? Mm-hmm. Like, you see, I did this, I did that. Why did she not reward this covert contract with the fidelity and everything I wanted to?
That's why I call it relational equity. It's like they believe that that there's some sort of buffer, or there is some sort of insurance policy against a woman succumbing, I guess, to her hypergamous instincts.
And it's always the stuff he already is good at. It's never things that he had to work from zero to build.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of these guys on the patriarchs side of things like to build into that. Well, you got to be, not only do you have to, bench 300, you also have to be a leader among men, and you also have to be.
Don't let her drive is a common one.
Yeah.
Like the soft Shiara law, like the friendly Shiara.
So when people give me grief about, hypergamy doesn't care, remember what that is that's me saying, don't just believe that you're like what you put into the relationship is going to be in any way an insurance policy against her, deciding that one day you will, what you do is not enough. So that's really where that all came from. But again, I think the loyalty issue, or the fact that can a woman be faithful to a guy? I've been married for 23 years. I'm fairly certain my wife has never had sex with anybody except for me in those 25 years. Okay. I'm very certain that I have a really strong relationship, but people will always say, well, Rollo, don't you know that she can take you for everything you're worth? Don't you know that she can, clear you? She'll zero you out in a heartbeat if you don't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, well, that's part of the lifestyle. That is the risks that I have assumed. And I think it's paid off pretty well up to now. People don't want to hear that. That's why I don't use my marriage as sort of a baseline for like a metric for people to say, this is what's possible for you. I don't use that, but I also have to focus on other things too when it comes to like, just because you're Mr. Perfect, because you washed the dishes, because you did the kids' homework, does not necessarily mean that she's not going to find somebody better and at some point have the thought in her head. Maybe she never acts on it, but the thought in the head, the operating system is still based on hypergamy.
I do notice too, they stopped reading right around that time for the strategy. Don't you know she could take half? Well, we've got strategies for that. It's Operation Scorched Earth.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same as like mutually assured destruction between the commies and the Americans. If you're in a divorce, and I've actually seen my stepdad did this, if you're willing, if she wants to take half of your stuff, if you're the kind of guy who's willing to burn it down and give half the ashes, it's a strong deterrent for adversarial divorce. But it's hard for guys because when you're divorced, and we all know that most of the time it's women initiating and guys being blindsided, that they aren't able to switch from this is the love of my life and I'm fully invested in her into that, screw that bitch moment. And they can't make that thing. So you kind of have to build a strategy. Like, look, you have to assume instantly that this is no longer a friend, but an enemy. You have to be encouraging that if she tries to take you for everything, you're going to make sure everything counts for as little as possible. So at least then you're dealing with these divorce rape situations from a position of strength. And from most of the lawyers I've talked to, this tends to lead to a much more amicable situation, especially if the guy has prepared himself. Like he documents what kind of childcare he does. So they show he's a good father. He knows all those things that are legal requirements for custody. So he's in a position to say, yeah, I can get 50+% custody and I'm willing to burn this stuff down rather than just roll over and die, which gives a strong investment for the girl to act nice for her best interest, even if she doesn't like him. And so that's the one part I dislike about MGTOW, Black Pill, when they just, as soon as there's a challenge, they forget that the obstacle is the way and there's strategies around all this stuff. But it involves you have to making hard decisions or being the bad guy in somebody else's story, which guys are terrified of. And the funniest part about it is when you have this this nuclear option in your back pocket, it actually makes it less likely that they happen over the long term because people know not to push boundaries of people who have strong boundary enforcement. It's only soft targets that get whacked. And Sean,
I'm curious
correct me if I'm
about
wrong,
this.
Sean. I know this might sound
Scorched
pretty
Earth
horrible, and I'm pretty sure you would never suggest to a client to like nuke the family unit if she tries to do it first.
Yeah, I'm really curious about this scorched earth technique that you're talking about. Like, what does that look like? Like, how do you burn it all down?
Well,
how do you hand her half the ashes? That's what I'm curious about.
Yeah, well, I can use my stepdad as an example. For he was like literally smoking up the net assets. Things were going away, selling things, giving away. That was like the thing, and then just fighting her every step of the way. He would rather give it to the lawyers was the thing. Now this can manifest in different ways. Sometimes for people, it's just
okay. So
he was
liquidating assets and
PTSD
removing them from the matrimonial
anxiety
pile.
From this thing, his boss will cut back his hours, cut his income.
Mm-hmm.
All these different ways. Because if the idea is your potential earning is calculated, and they say, well, you earn 100,000, so you have to give her 50. Obviously, if you have such a hardship on this divorce proceeding that you lose your job because you can't keep it, well, then half of that is nothing. Now, it's an extreme example, but you kind of get the way you kind of have to apply it to a guy's individual thing. For yours, it might be different. I mean, you want to be like a dark triad evil guy. I know a lot of guys are like, just put all your money in Bitcoin, then they can't get at it, which legally that's a horrible idea. But I mean, it gets the point across. Sometimes it's just simple as like giving it all to the lawyers and fighting every step of the way. Or
I'm not a big
giving
fan
her
of that
like a
approach,
much better offering.
Okay, got it.
But like I said, for you might be well off and off. You're just like, yeah, here, take half, get out of my face. That's the other option.
There's always some preparation on the exit that guys have to go through. I'm not totally thrilled about the burning shit down and handing over ashes because you're burning down half your shit too. That's almost like cutting off your nose to spite your own face sort of thing. But I think, yeah, like that's certainly one option for sure.
I also think that I'm sorry, Sean, you were going to say?
No, go ahead, Rollo.
I was also going to say is like I think it was Rich who said this is like you never really realize who your wife is until you see her across the table from you at the divorce settlement or something like that.
Yep.
And
it's not the same woman that you were crying about during the wedding ceremony when you're watching the slides going up. Oh, I was so in love with her.
Yeah.
Slide 2, slide 3. Oh, look how beautiful we look together. That's not the same chick you're getting divorced from.
And I get that, and I think that there's a certain, I don't want to say it's pessimism or cynicism that goes along with the fact of saying, like, when I go out and I say there's no such thing as a quality woman, guys lose their minds. I was having that conversation with Andrew Tate a few weeks ago, and Andrew Tate said it this way. He said, if you're going to build a race car, you don't just like build it from scratch. You find a good car and you build it up and you make it into a race car. He says the same thing with women. It's like, are there women that are better, who are better bases to turn into a wife, to turn into a long-term relationship? Yes, absolutely. But like, to find someone who is, to expect that is like almost non-existent, particularly in Western culture right now. And I think that when you have, when I'm saying something like that, when I'm saying, there's no such thing as a quality woman, people think that I'm just denying the fact that they're, or they take it and they turn it around into like this extreme binary example. They say, well, he's saying there's no such thing as really good women. There's no such thing as that. I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying at all.
No,
I'm
you're
saying
their checklist is garbage and it's not going to save them.
Well, what I'm saying is that it's an ideal. And it's an ideal that a lot of guys get into their heads, and they think there's the only way that they are ever going to get married is if they find that, virgin bride who's wholesome and dresses like an Amish, school marm or something like that.
And even if quality women exist, that's not useful. Guys will do that, or they'll have a checklist. Okay, needs to have a notch count of 3. Dad has to be around, and all these things, thinking that once I've solved for that, nothing else matters. I've got 100% chance of it being good, and they think it bubble wraps their life because they found an Amish version. Meanwhile, the Amish virgin decides she wants a porn career and has to leave him anyway. It totally offloads the burden of performance, I think is how you put it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't like it. Even if it is true, even if there is these third standard deviation women that, shit rainbows and fart incense or whatever, like, you can't account for that. You just have to do your best to act in a way that makes the people around you act right. And if you're a high quality man that a girl would be stupid to let go, they tend to act better. Like Rich said, during the wedding, the wife was acting just wonderful. And during the divorce, she was a right cunt. The only difference is how invested she is towards, Rich in the example. At the beginning, a lot. And at the end, not so much. Hope you don't mind me using you as an example there, Rich. I don't mean to.
No, carry on. I'm just listening and doing some work on this other screen here. But yeah.
But I'm as far as like what Sean was asking here with respect to loyalty, I don't think that a woman being loyal in any way refutes or in any way refutes hypergamy. As far as like, can a woman be loyal? Yeah, of course. The thing I also get into with these guys is when I talk about how men and women approach love from different concepts. In fact, I was going to talk about that today. Respect is another one of those things that men and women have differing, like, gendered concepts for those things. But I think love is another one of those. And so when I say women are fundamentally lack the capacity to love a man in the idealistic way that a man believes that woman should be able to love him. Now, of course, what happens is, like, you get these black pill guys who will go and say, "Oh, Rollo's saying women can't love anybody." I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying, dumbass. I live this out. Like, right now, I've been very much in love with my wife, and she's very much in love with me. But we have come to that mutual love through different channels, through different gendered channels, and I think that's respect is one of those, love is one of those.
Admiration.
Admiration might be one of those as well.
Well, she has to look up to you. There's no way that she thinks you're her best option if she doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a part of her, and I know she'll probably not admit it because girls love her proud this way, that she doesn't think that this is the best guy ever. He's way better than me in whatever way matters to her. Whether that's true or not is irrelevant. That she feels it on some extent is what entices her to be invested in you both as a family unit. Mm-hmm. If she didn't think you were that great, she probably would have left right now and taken half of your Ibanez guitars.
Yeah, not this one. That's so when it comes to, I think there's this maybe the loyalty is one of those things. It tends to be one of these ideas that people want to attach like binary extremes to. Like, so if I say there's a difference between how men and women approach love, then people will say, oh, Rollo said they can't love. If I say there's a difference between how men and women like come to the idea of loyalty or even friendship for that matter, I think that men, well, both sexes, I think, base their understanding of friendship on their same sex concepts.
Yeah.
And so when you put a man and a woman together and you say, oh, you guys are going to be friends. Well, she approaches it from the respect that, oh, this is how I am with my girlfriends. And the guy, approaches it from the idea that he needs to in some way change himself so that he can be more friend appropriate for a woman but is still using his same sex friendship concept as a model for that. I think that's why there's no real friendship between men and women in the same sense of the word as like you would with all your guy friends or all her girlfriends.
Well, and loyalty among men can be pretty binary, where it's an everyday occurrence where men will have teams where they will literally die for their teammate. You don't see that so much with women. And so if a man is approaching women with that same expectation of loyalty, is applying a male template, applying that template to female relationships, it's probably not going to work out.
Well, and then also you have to, maybe this is something we should have picked apart in the beginning, is why is loyalty important to either sex? Why is loyalty?
Because then you can fail and the girl will still accept you for who you are. That's that mommy worship crap still.
Yes.
Loyalty to a guy means, okay, I can fuck up as bad as possible and she will still love me perfectly, because that's a very comforting feeling. And the only one who does that is mom. And even then,
Well, and that's why we have those wedding vows, right? That's why we make those promises before God and your friends and everybody else, so that if somebody in that marriage, in that union, breaks that, then they're at least subject to shame from the tribe or shame from the religion or shame from the society that saw them do that, saw them get up before God and country and people to make those vows. Why are they vows? Why is it a promise in the first place is what I'm getting at, is that and I think you're right, Sean. I think that the concept of loyalty is sort of gender specific, just like I was saying, respect is gender specific. For men, respect is something that has to be earned. It's something that it's meritorious, right? It's something that you don't just respect. Like people say, well, you got to have like just general respect for people, but I would disagree with that. I think that men have to look at somebody, and we judge men and we respect men based on their burden of performance, and not just with women, but like just in life in general. Like, what have you done with yourself? Like what is it about you that is respectable? Whereas for women, respect is just always on. It's well, I'm a woman, so therefore I'm deserving of respect. And guys will pile on with that too. Like, oh yes, I respect you too. They'll make it a
because she can make it to babies.
Yeah. So
there's intrinsic worth that guys just don't have.
And that's the protection side of there. Now we're going to get back into the Evo Psych here. That's the protection side of it. We're happy to pile on and happy to say that because we're innately, wired for that. I think, Ryan, you posted something about how we're innately wired to protect,
to defend women, because if we didn't, our tribes would have died off, and the people that did protect them, because you only need one guy to rebuild a tribe, but you need a bunch of women. So their eggs are expensive, sperm is cheap, and so we're hardwired to automatically assume the best of the women. They're just innately more valuable. She could act, Cave Cindy could act like a complete thought, and Caveman Todd will put up with it because he needs her. Otherwise, their tribe can't go on a hunt next year because they won't have enough kids for it. I know that's like probably the worst scientific explanation you've ever heard, but that's generally what it is.
Right. There was a time in history where children would grow to full maturity in 12 months, eh?
What were you saying? There was the
Let's take him hunting. He's a toddler now.
What was it? Was it the big head theory? Is because we have such big heads that we need to.
It makes women generally more helpless, and they're more helpless, if we want to survive as an intelligent species, we have to be more protective of them than we are of the guys. And I always like this. I use the chocolate cake argument. Back in the day, we're hardwired for simple carbohydrates because cavemen needed it because we were constantly starving. Problem is, today we've got so much sugar around that chocolate cake is actually making us sick. It's giving us diabetes. And so this is a sexual version of that same manifestation, where before protecting women was what kept your tribe going. Now, 7 billion of us with Tinder, it's sexual diabetes. And so we kind of have to learn to temper that innate protection instinct we have for women to only do it when they're invested in us first. And that's like a pickup artist, the 2/3 rule. Only text her back 2/3 as much because you need her more invested than you. Otherwise, she'll take advantage of your protective instincts. And that's how every guy ends up with a BPD chick on your doorstep reading your book, crying about how it describes his life to a T.
And that is what goes against the old social contract concepts of what loyalty is.
Yeah.
What
Doc, does this make any sense, by the way?
should be. What's that?
You lost me at the big head theory. Women.
Oh, the big head theory. Oh, you got to
big
send him that
so that we
send
can
him that.
keep.
Yeah,
women
it's
more
a
helpless.
birthing thing. Here, I'll send you the link. Do you have your phone on you?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll
I'll
send
tweet
you
it to you or
It's easier
DM it to
to
you.
read it.
But wait, help me out though. The theory is that we have big heads so that women will be helpless.
Well, because we're smart. Like, a cow, you can birth a cow and they're running in like 15 minutes.
Right.
But people, because we have such larger heads, we have to deliver them somewhat prematurely where they aren't able to walk around, which causes women to need wider
babies are
cavities.
helpless. Okay.
And they're generally just more helpless on a physical level, so they require male protection during the formative years. I think we can say that is like a safe assumption, right?
There's a lot of skills that are difficult to develop in the womb that are specific to humans.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Survival.
because of that, the idea is that guys have developed a protective instinct of women, because otherwise, if we just ejaculated and evacuated, cave chicks with like 2-year-olds were going to end up getting eaten by bears. And so those tribes died off. Meanwhile, the ones that protected them survived.
Okay. I'm with you.
Well,
And then the idea is now in this modern day, when all of those risks are mitigated against, because, dishwashers and police and whatever, is that it can now be used excessively and weaponized against us in the same way that chocolate cake makes a survival instinct into now a sickness.
Okay. Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, okay.
So let me ask you all a question. So this question of hypergamy, my thing is all about risk management. And if I can keep a few cases out of family court, then I will have fulfilled my purpose on the planet here. So part of risk management is knowing what to pay attention to, choosing the relevant variables. How much attention should men be paying to hypergamy with a woman that they're thinking about getting serious with?
When you're pedaling your bike, do you focus on which foot goes down, or is it just kind of... I know that's not like a very good answer. I can tell by your face, but it's one of those things I like to study as much as possible so I can roundly forget about it.
Okay.
I think it needs to be something that is part of your internalized understanding about women. Like I tell guys this all the time, because like people will say, I pity Rollo because he has to game his wife all the time. And it's like, no, it has become internalized. It's like my reflexive responses with my wife are what other people would say is, oh, that's a red pill. He's red pill aware, red pill smell. It's not like I go through my books and like say, oh, well, she shit tested me, so I'm going to have to go with, option A, option B, option C. And I would tend to agree with Ryan, as I think that you should understand it. You should know it and tuck it away, keep it in your head. I think it was Pook who said something like, game works better if you don't think about it too much, or if you get to the point where you don't have to think about it too much.
That's the key, is you get to the point where you don't have to think about it. I think if you spend too much time milling over hypergamy and watching videos on it and reading essays on it and fighting with people on it, it's like you're
paranoid.
Maybe that's part of the process of understanding it, for some guys. But yeah, maybe it gets to like a paranoia point, right? I mean, it's really about you being on your purpose and chasing excellence and just making sure that you're the best that she can do, and that's it.
And that's the great thing too, is like once that clicks for you, once you have accepted the fact that you have a burden of performance, once you've accepted the fact that a woman should be a complement to your life and not the focus of it, once you get that in your head and you internalize that, what you're doing is what will attract her, is what will bring her and to make her want to be associated with a guy like you, because that's your direction, and that's what you are your own mental point of origin.
And I think, too, that's, Sean, a good answer for this, when you're talking about how much you pay attention to it. I assume you mean from the sake of when she's looking to branch swing or step aside or move on, how much hypergamy you want to keep in mind. And that's easy, because you understand if a girl has a best option and it's not you, she'll make herself available. So that's when you start getting like the girls' nights out, her phone all of a sudden has a password on it, little things like that, which... And this is why you don't want to pay too much attention, because then you start getting paranoid and every molehill is a mountain. But if you understand, okay, All of a sudden, she started working out with no prompting from me. All of a sudden, she's got a new friend and they hang out and she has girls' nights out and she accuses me of being like controlling. Like, you kind of understand the game is up right now. And I think that's the level of interest you should have in hypergamy, to kind of see the signs. Because guys, like I said, the big head theory stuff, they're way too invested in a girl to the point that they gloss over these very serious red flags, as opposed to a guy who's objectively looking at her, not like as a loving thing, just practically. Hypergamy, she's going to be looking for her best option. And if she's not acting as if I'm her best option, then that means most likely something or someone else is. And that's something you can address one way or the other, either
Or
something you're not doing, a need that's not being fulfilled, or maybe
the clock's
just
ticking.
planning to get rid of. Yeah.
It may not be happening there and then, but the clock's ticking, you know, as the situation deteriorates.
Yeah.
I get why you're asking that too, Sean, because I think a lot of people think that there is this overemphasis on like being hyper aware of hypergamy, and I to some of these guys' credit, yeah, I would say that definitely is a thing for guys who are new to this, or guys who just like they got into MGTOW, maybe they got into something red pill, and then they came across the idea of hypergamy, and that's really the reason like we're hyper aware of this right now, is because the mainstream has picked up on this. They picked up on things like incel, they picked up on MGTOW, they picked up on, oh, these guys are all obsessed with hypergamy. It's like, no, if you understand this and you aren't fixated on it. I think a lot of the reason why guys get fixated on that, on hypergamy, or like using it as sort of their like catch-all response to anything that's like thrown at them by men or women, is because it sort of reinforces their choice that is really a non-choice to not engage, to say, well, it's all not worth it. The juice ain't worth the squeeze. Well, how do you know that? Because hypergamy.
Yes.
No,
yeah.
that's
yeah. And that's the part that what you just said, Rollo, I think that's really sort of what got me started down the path on the script that I'm working on, is hypergamy being the answer to every question. Mm-hmm. Where we have, one of the good things psychology has done was build a tremendous amount of data around things like big 5 personality traits and personality, and it's just mountains of stuff out there. And if you're going to throw all of that out because you have this one explanation that feels good to you, that's not a good way to that's not a good thing to base decisions on in your life. And
yeah, but white belts think front kicks are the answer to everything.
Yeah.
Well, they're the answer to a lot of stuff, but not everything. Yeah. And I came across a quote when I was combing through so much hypergamy stuff that's written out there. Some of it by you, Rollo, a lot of it by other people, because I wanted to see what other people are saying. I know what you say about it. I want to hear what other people are saying. And I came across this short post that described hypergamy in a way that I don't know if you'd agree with it. I didn't particularly agree with it, but the first comment was, oh, this explains so much. It's so disappointing, but now I get it. And if you compare that to the way people have handled some of the stuff that's come out of the social sciences, like the implicit association test that has been completely thoroughly debunked. Even the people who came up with it said it's, don't rely on this. It's no good. But you see people still writing about it in that same tone. Oh, it makes so much sense, especially all this behavior that I don't like. It all makes so much sense now. And this is
where remember the author, by the way?
No, I don't. No, it was pretty obscure, but
I might know it. That's why I'm asking.
Yeah,
I got into it when he still had a YouTube channel. I got into it with Alexander Grace one time, and Alexander decided that one day he didn't want to be associated with the red pill anymore.
He's still
and
around.
So
He's still doing videos.
I think he might still be, not to the degree he was before. And so I kind of locked horns with Alexander and saying, look, the only reason you're doing this, the only reason you're saying this is because you need to sort of back up off of the red pill, or back up off of things like hypergamy. And so that was his main gripe, was like, well, all these guys, their answer to everything is just hypergamy. And it's like, well, and then so he starts throwing out all of these critiques of hypergamy that I've already covered, that I covered a long time ago in that one post, The Misconceptions About Hypergamy, that I sent you. I also have another one called False Equivalencies, where a lot of guys will like to cling to the idea that if for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction for women. So if women are hypergamous, then men must also be hypergamous, which is
the hypogamy,
the hypogamy nonsense,
but
right?
Men do it too.
Well, and then
that's why I like Sean, because he's not like, no offense, Sean, you're not stupid. You're a smart guy, and your brand isn't built on calling Rollo a dick.
Don't worry, I'm not offended by you not
critique,
calling me
I take it
stupid.
seriously.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I appreciate
So
that.
I can go and talk till I'm blue in the face, where I say, look here, like, hypergamy is not a straitjacket. There's no such thing as hypogamy. Okay, men and women are different. We have different mating strategies, and those mating strategies are antagonistic. Here's a bunch. I can as logically and as deductively and as efficiently as I can possibly present this stuff. You're right. People are still gonna take that, and they're gonna go, oh, now my blinders are off. I finally realize what's going on now. I can now give up in good conscience. Like, it was never gonna work for me in the first place, and now here's my reason why. Those are the people that I get into arguments about why it is that men and women are better together than they are apart. Or if I'll say that we are an innate complements to one another. It's just finding that balance of that complementarity between the two of them, which is the real challenge right now, I think. But exactly that. It's like I get it from both sides. I get it from the guys who are saying all you ever do is talk about hypergamy, and then I got the guys who are saying, what do you mean men and women can come together and live in peace and harmony?
Well, let me bounce this summation off of you. There's a burden of performance that men have, right? And some sociologists have known this for a very long time. Like Roy Baumeister is a social psychologist in Florida. He looked at cultures across time and throughout cultures, and found that without exception, men have to earn their place in their society
to become
right. So that's a tough thing for some guys to sit with. For some reason, I kind of like it. I like that I have to get up in the morning and go do something useful, but I think some guys have trouble with that. And so maybe the utility in the notion of hypergamy is almost that some guys, you have to club them over the head with this notion that, no, you're not good enough the way you are. No, it's not going to work out well if you think you're good enough the way you are. And hypergamy maybe is the recognition of this part of female nature is a way of getting that message to guys.
And that's what rubs a lot of these guys the wrong way when they
would you say that I said that fairly?
Yeah, I would say so. I do. I've always said, I've written several articles on this about men's burden of performance. And another reason why I lock horns with MGTOWs is the fact that I'll say, look, you have a burden of performance, and you're going to be, your estimate, your respectability is going to be based on how well you match up to that. And a lot of guys will say, well, I don't think that's fair. We should all just live along and, just go along.
Well, it's not just that. They hate that women to some extent define masculinity that way. And that rubs them the wrong way. But I get what Sean's saying. Yeah. But here's the thing, Sean, if they didn't have hypergamy, they'll pick some other excuse.
Right.
That's why we always say it's triage, never red pill your friends. If somebody's not looking for this, don't try and give it to them. The kind of guy who actually wants to fix things will put in effort. The kind of guy who doesn't will just use all of this as an excuse.
Yeah, one guy made an interesting comment in this Twitter discussion I was having this afternoon. He said that I was poking at guys who parrot Rollo saying hypergamy doesn't care, because some guys say it like Rich will say it, and Rich knows what he's talking about. But some guys I hear that they're just saying it, and I don't think they quite get what they're saying. And I forgot who it was that told me, I think it was Chess Rockwell, Rule Zero Dad. I think he told me that that's where some guys start, and you got to give them a little grace because it takes a while to build nuance. And I was thinking about that, how many guys go on and try to build nuance, and I decided that pretty much most of the guys I know that are wrestling with this material are wrestling with it, and they're trying to build that nuance. So it was a good point.
I think the whole burden of performance thing really underscores the whole, I don't know, the debate really is, do guys want to be, do they want to be better? Do they want to do something that's going to put them at a different level? And to give guys, I was just about to say, is like a lot of guys, particularly on the patriarch side of things, if you're of a more tradcon mindset, that it sort of goes hand in hand with the idea of personal responsibility. So if I can remember when the Selfish Gene came out, and women lost their minds at that. This was back in 2009, I think, 2010, somewhere around there, or or maybe it was even before that. It might have been like mid 2000s.
Is that a good book? I haven't read it yet.
Yeah, it's fantastic book, but it's a little bit dated material. But that
Okay.
and then the Red Queen, when those things came out and they got into the pickup artist community, women lost their shit because they thought that those guys were going to use the material in those books to justify being manipulative pricks, right? To justify like picking up on, like not investing in women and just basically spinning plates and doing all this, doing what pickup artists do and
That's
using
the flip
that
side
as
of what
the
Sean was saying
rationale.
earlier. These guys that use hypergamy as a crutch, they think that the guys that are
Right.
like the narcissists, they don't read this, they don't care.
And
They don't
that's
need
where
an
I was
excuse.
going with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where I was going with that because women said, "Well, oh great, now it's the devil made me do it, or it's biology made me do it." And so TradCon guys jumped in and they said, "Well, you just because you can, or just because you're built that way, doesn't mean you can't make the choice not to be that way." And so then you get into then you get into like issues of free will, and you get into we're humans, we're not animals, we've evolved above all of this stuff. And
haven't.
So much
or
navel-gazing.
yeah, and I'm
That sounds like a Disney movie.
it's funny and it's great to consider, but like this is something I'm putting in my fourth book right now, which is are we animals, or are we something more than animals? And if we are something more than animals, then what is it about our animal nature, our evolved nature, that influences us as people, and how does that affect our decision making process? So if I go and I say, well, I have a selfish gene, or I'm just made this way, or women are just hypergamous, so that's why she does that. A lot of guys want to say, well, that's you copping out. That's you trying to give women an excuse, a rationale for bad behavior. And then that's giving you guys an excuse not to be better, not to make yourself into something more, because
perception is projection.
Yeah, and so what they're saying here is that if family, or was it we're at a low fertility rate in this country because of guys like you, because you don't accept responsibility, so it becomes an issue of personal responsibility now, because I happen to analyze hypergamy and I said hypergamy doesn't care.
It's all your fault. Beanie Man bad.
Yes.
See that though?
Yeah.
It's like children. All they want to find out is, well, I don't need to pick it up. It's not my fault. And that's delayed adolescence for men and women.
You know what?
And that part drives me nuts.
Yeah, you know what blows me away, Ryan? Like, one of the things that drives me nuts is like there's guys watching this stuff, they'll read the books, they'll get into the Reddits or whatever, and it's like, we had this guy call in once. I don't think you were on that show, Sean, on it Before the Train Wreck. I think Aaron was on with me, but this guy called in from a trailer park in Vegas, and I think he was working as a stagehand, if I'm not mistaken.
I remember that call. I listened to it. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And he's like, I'm having a hard time with women. They're just not sticking around. What's up with hypergamy? Blah 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 blah. And it's like, okay, so you're living in a trailer park, and who lives in a trailer park? Well, it's mostly like retirees. Okay, so you're bringing girls to your trailer in a trailer park full of retirees working as a stagehand, and you're having a hard time with women. They're not sticking around. You think there's some work you have to do? Right, and it's like,
be the best option. That's what hypergamy is,
right? Yeah,
be that.
And that's not to be a dick or to be disparaging, but it's like, this should be obvious to you, right? Like, you've got to be a better version of that if you want to attract a woman that's going to stick around, that's going to put up with your shit, right? It's tough, man. Sometimes it's like difficult to have that conversation with the dude. It's like you want to shake him and be like, "Hello."
Yeah, guys, I got to run pretty quick. I'm going to tell you a quick
Yeah, I gotta go
story.
soon, too.
First of all, I want to thank you because this has helped me round out this script I'm working on, and maybe I'll send it to each one of you guys if you want to take a look at it before I record it. But I'm still wrestling with the part about the fact that I don't see hypergamy ending relationships, which doesn't mean that hypergamy doesn't end relationships, because those relationships might not find their way into my office. So I'm wrestling with that. That's okay. You wrestle with ideas and you figure it out eventually. But I wanted something you said, Rollo, triggered this memory that I had. I had this professor in grad school. He was the behaviorism professor, and he was tough. I mean, he was like brutally tough. His name was Ragnar, and the joke around the school was that Ragnar sinks a lot of ships. And I loved him. We remained friends afterwards. But he gave this really interesting assignment one time. He gave a test. The test was, it was an essay question. What would you do if you discovered that the person that you're married to, your boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever, was a mechanical doll? Like they pulled away this mask and they were filled with levers and pulleys and wires and stuff. And they weren't really human. They were just mechanical. And this is the moment I knew that I was a behaviorist, because I gave the shortest answer in the class and I got the best grade, which is That's what we are. We're mechanical dolls. We
Mm-hmm.
use tubes and fluids instead of ropes and pulleys, but we are mechanical dolls, and it's important to understand the nature of us.
The turd flinging monkey paradox. Interesting.
Yeah.
What's
I
the
was
turd flinging monkey paradox?
Yeah.
What is that?
Oh, he's a guy who actually has a sex doll. He's big now. He's a big game thing.
Yeah.
Celestina, she has a YouTube channel and all that stuff. It's hilarious.
Waifu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's something, Sean. That's something that really bugs a lot of guys in this realm. There's guys who, and one of the reasons I'm focusing on religion on book 4 right now is because of that. Is like I am still open to the idea that we are more than just like little dolls hanging on strings, but also that it is very important that we recognize that we do have that part of us, and that's what influences a lot of the decisions that we make, whether we know it or we don't. I've been getting, and this is a little too cerebral for the red pill at this point, but I've been listening to a lot of stuff like by Sam Harris and some of these other guys when they're talking about like free will, and how free will is something that it's at least in question right now, that human beings actually have free will. And that throws a monkey wrench into a lot of different things. I'm not saying I'm not saying I sign on to it, but I'm just saying that I think that when we dig a little bit deeper here, the issue of loyalty, for example, a lot of guys are going to tie in a lot of moral thinking to go in behind that. That's why when I say, hypergamy doesn't care, and like people want to say, well, you guys, because you're saying that, guys are giving up. Well, also because I'm saying that guys are having their eyes open to where, what's going on in their lives, and they can make better choices as a result of that.
Yeah.
So
it's like the Christopher Hitchens side of things. That is free will existing? Well, even if it doesn't, I'm acting as if it does. That's
right.
As far into it as you need to look, in my opinion.
Right. But so like, I think a lot of guys think that either I pay too much attention to the nuts and bolts of things, and I don't say, well, we're higher than that, we're more evolved than that, we're above it all, and that's the general rationale, I think, for guys who want to say that the blank slate, if the blank slate isn't true, it should be true, because we have the choice to make it true.
Right.
See what I'm saying? Because we're supposed to be above all of that, and I said this also in my 4th book, is that a lot of the stuff that we consider sin, a lot of the stuff that we consider like immoral behavior, or even just like amoral behavior, is stuff that is strongly linked to our evolutionary process, like how we got to be what we are. Why? I don't know if you guys have read Alpha God yet, but I keep throwing this one at you.
Still on the list, man.
Fantastic
it's on the
book
list for me too. Yeah.
Fantastic book, but in the sense that why do we have the beliefs that we do? The things that we consider moral right now are actually rooted in the evolutionary process. The reason why we think of like the Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic God as male is because he is a alpha male. That's why it's called Alpha God. And so I've been reading a lot of this stuff, but like people will lose their minds over this. And that's why I think a lot of people want to pile on things that sound like virtuous, like loyalty and honor and duty and respect and all that other good stuff. And so you're always going to run into guys who are going to want to make it more than just more than just a physical evolutionary perspective.
They want it vague, ill-defined, so nobody can not fit within it.
Yeah, they want to build something more on top of it. And in my first book, I have a chapter in there called The Honor System. And it's a real, if you haven't read it, it's also on my blog, but it's how men's consideration or men's understanding of like something like honor, which I would say loyalty also is included in that, is something that should be above and beyond our evolved process. And in that, people didn't like that chapter because I was sort of busting down the concept of honor to its nuts and bolts. Like, why is it even a thing amongst men? Like, why is respect such a big deal to guys? Why is integrity or honor or duty or all? Why is that such a big deal to guys? Well, there's an evolutionary component to that people don't want to focus on. They would rather focus on something that's a little more esoteric.
Yeah, what it boils down to when it comes down to that whole I just want to say something real quick. When it comes to that whole respect things, it feels like guys are looking for that respect, or they want to get that acknowledgement of respect because it lets them relax. You know, once they think they have it, there's a little less work for them to do. You know.
Yeah, and then people start getting pretty anxious when you start tinkering with that or threatening that in any way.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I got to hit the road. Ryan's great to see you.
I got to run too.
Yeah,
Rich,
before you
I'll
run,
see
quick
you
question on the
Monday.
MMPI 2. If I want to learn more about it, like how to interpret it and how to do it, obviously I'm not going to do it as a non-clinicist, but what research would I want to look at? Is there a book you'd recommend to get started?
Oh man, I just threw away my MMPI manual because I never use it. It was 15 years old. Let me get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Right.
All
on.
right,
guys.
Rollo, thanks for the invite.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Got to run
See you
too.
guys.
See ya.
All right, we'll see
Bye.
you. Ryan will stick around with me. Oh, wait.
On.
There you are.
You guys
Yeah,
may not
yeah.
know,
I got
but
you.
Sean looks like a normal sized guy. You meet him in real life, he's a bear. He's like
tall.
6'3".
He's tall. Yeah, he's a tall dude. I
Solid
remember
steel
that.
bones. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Don't
So
let
I
that
wanted-
soft voice feel you. He'll whoop your ass.
I'm glad we kind of hashed that out. I hope Sean will do it justice, because he's at a different level than I think a lot of guys in the man. Certainly at a different level than I am.
Well, he's looking on how to apply it, and I think
Mhm.
that's the cool part. And I like our difference too. So you're very 10,000 foot clouds. You like putting the overarching theory together, and I kind of look at it at a very on the ground level. So it's kind of neat to see those two things play against each other, and then to have a real pro in a different field come in. It's fascinating.
Well, I'm glad he is giving, the manosphere and the red pill, such as it is, a not giving it short shrift, right? I mean, not like thinking that it's just a bunch of jamokes coming together and blathering on about like how bad women are, because that's what a lot of people think right now.
Well, that's the surface interpretation.
Yeah,
like all these guys, you're saying, well, Rollo, you think this. You're always finding the most useless white belt, 10 followers, nobody's ever, who just found this out yesterday. And I think it's almost a bad thing for you that you've got such an awesome brand, is that so many of the white belts are bringing stuff to your attention and you catch it. Because I think you're really at the point now where you kind of need intermediate to advanced people, because there's a lot better conversations at that level. But then again, you're a big softie, so you like
I am. I
like
like to. Well, because here's the thing: is I've been doing this for so long. Really, one of the reasons I started this show, the Red Pill 101 with Pat, was because I wanted to get into some more remedial stuff. Because I can't presume that everybody who's a new listener or a new reader knows everything that I'm talking about. Like I get there's like my regular commenters on my blog. I feel like I owe them something, but then I also have to remember that if somebody might have just picked up the book yesterday and they go, oh, what's this Rollo Tomassi guy about? And then they're going to go look. And if it's like this really super advanced highbrow kind of stuff, like my last, like probably 3 or 4 blog posts, why would they stick around if they need something that's a little bit more remedial? Like, well, what is alpha, right? Okay, well, here we go. And so I try to rewind the tape every now and then so that I can sort of play up to those guys. That's why I wanted to talk about respect today, is because I'm sort of going back to some concepts that I'm not saying I've changed my mind about them. I'm just saying maybe I got more information right now. I talked about
well, if this thing was it's not Latin. There's always evolving infrastructure and information about this.
Right.
Actually, I got a question for you on this. Obviously, you know my thought on it. I don't care if it's true as long as it's useful. I'm sure you've seen that study where people aren't designed for effective truth or for objective truth. So my thought on this is it doesn't have to be true, only as long as it has the outcomes that are useful enough to men to succeed. I think you might have a more objective view of this. I'm curious as to your thoughts.
I have a
truth versus utility.
All right. So there's a couple of things. The study you're talking about, I forget the dude's name, but I'll have to dig it up and put it in the description here. But I actually saved the link. I have it somewhere here. But there was a study about a guy who was, I forget the dude's name, but he was saying that the human brain did not evolve to accept certain kinds of realities.
Yeah. Which makes sense. Like when you think about some tribes, how they can't see the color blue, or
or they don't have words for things that another tribe does or another culture does, or they have lots of words for one thing. Like the Eskimos have like 68 words for snow or something like that. They're those kinds of things. Like the human brain only evolved to like you're saying, deal with what is useful and disregard the rest. And then so when something comes into their reality that says, look, here's something that's been outside of your evolved consciousness, what do you think of this? That's when people sort of have that breakdown. They don't know what to do,
or they just ignore it, like Columbus when he came over in the ships and the natives just didn't see them.
It creates cognitive dissonance is what it does. And so they have a real tough time with that. So that's something I've been kind of exploring as far as also with regard to like free will and stuff too. Again, I think it's still useful to believe that we do have free will. I think we should also, like, people, when I go and I say, well, hypergamy is this, or here's the evolved, and these are just ideas. It's not something I came up with. I'm like looking at something and I'm just sort of interpreting it through my lens and articulating something
millions of field
someone
reports
has already done. Like somebody says to me, like, "Oh, Rollo, did you know that 1 in every 200 guys is a direct descendant of Genghis Khan?" I'm like, all right, hot damn, I'll write an essay about that. What are the dots that I can connect from a red pill perspective with this new information?
Being alpha is worldwide territory.
I didn't go and actually do the genetic, decoding of the DNA, but I can interpret it at least. And a lot of people don't like that because it throws that monkey wrench into like what it is that they are consciously want to be aware of, or what they evolved to be aware of. And then so here you are putting information like that into their reality.
Yeah, well, they want affirmations. People want to know that whatever they're doing is right. You're going to be okay. If something goes wrong, it's not your fault. It's literally the thought process of 9-year-olds.
Right. Well, they want. I think there's a certain mentality that, I think one of the reasons why Sean was asking the question about loyalty is because there is that the moralist side of that argument. Like, loyalty should be a big deal, and what goes along with that? What goes along with that, right? Do women have agency? If they do have agency, what's their degree of responsibility? If they don't have agency, what's the degree of responsibility for the men that are involved in that whole thing? And so it opens this huge can of worms when you start looking at it from a moralist perspective. Now, I don't even do that. I didn't even bother with that.
We need to, because you could say what is moral tomorrow and nobody's going to give a shit.
Yeah.
What's here right now in front of us is what we as a society have considered moral. Girls, divorce, rape, thottery, infidelity being cool, but being a white man is not, or whatever arguments you want to have for the moral thing. That's already pretty much codified. It's shifting, but I'm not getting any younger, so I don't got time to wait.
Well, like when it comes to like one big thing on the moralist argument is personal responsibility. Well, shouldn't that woman be held responsible for her actions? Or
what mechanism is
like
that?
and you and I have discussed this before. Like when some hack job like Glow says, well, because the red pill is an ideology because
he wants it to be, and he wants to argue with other ideologies.
That's the real truth. But this is the argument. It points towards universal cosmic truths, right? So I've heard I've heard the guy from Rationality Rules. His name escapes me. I think Stefan. His name is Stefan Woodsworth.
What's with guys named Stefan and this weird
he got into like or at least 2 or 3 different videos with Stefan Molyneux about universally preferred behavior. And I thought it was fascinating. And I don't suggest anybody, unless you have about 45 minutes you really want to waste on a lot of back and forth, I don't suggest you go watch that. But I found it fascinating because here you have this concept that that could relate to the red pill, in that if I go and I say, well, women are hypergamous, and this is the pragmatic function of that hypergamy, or women approach love differently, or women approach respect, all of these things that we think of as just sort of nuts and bolts red pill.
It's a lens in order to view the narrative of the whatever situations come up.
What Glow and even Stefan Molyneux will say, well, those truths point to a moral outcome. Like, just because a woman is hypergamous doesn't excuse her from the moral implications of the behavior that hypergamy points her to.
Does it though? That's just it.
That's the argument.
Do you know why chivalry is a moral thing? It's because guys didn't want to get stabbed, so they made an agreement amongst each other. If you see me taking a shit, don't shoot me. Or if I'm putting on my armor, I won't. Don't kill me, and I'll do the same to you. So everybody had this agreed set of rules to abide by. And that's all morality is. Get the whole team and they agree to a rule. Soccer is soccer because everybody agrees to a certain set of moral rules that they call rules. But right now we don't have that because there's no enforcement mechanism. A girl can be a complete thought in her 20s. And this is the Michael stories from the TRP sidebar. Complete thought in her 20s, settle down in her 30s, find some provision beta male type, marry him, have a bunch of kids, leave him when he's 5 years old, find a new Chad, whatever. You could say that's not moral, but what's stopping her from pursuing exactly what she wants and whatever short-term thinking she wants to follow it on? So if you want to talk moral, talk about enforcement, because rules don't matter without enforcement.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
We've removed that. There's no longer, we have police, we have bear patrols. Like the dangers of 1980s or 1880s Britain are gone. And those were always there. Like a girl would starve in the street without a man. So she was pretty invested in keeping her man. But now we don't have that. A divorced girl can move into the neighborhood and the other girls will welcome her with open arms. So how is it moral if nobody seems to care?
Right. I also have guys who will tell me that like when I talk about how men and women approach love from different concepts, or here's the best one. It's like you just mentioned it, the turd flinging monkey sort of paradox right there. Like love.
I just made that up. I didn't know that was
I know. Well, it's like TFM has said this, and you know what? Say what you want to about TFM. He's a smart guy.
Oh, yeah,
but he once said, like his approach is this: is that love is just chemicals floating around in your body, and
so it's hunger.
It's used, and it's an evolutionary sort of vestigial byproduct of the feelings and everything, so that you'll stay together and you will raise a child to adulthood, and you'll form a family, form a tribe, because human beings did better in our ancestral past if we all cooperated and formed tribes. And I 100% agree. I think human beings are naturally tribalistic and have a lot to do with that. And so we can go and say that. If I go and say that and I say, well, love, your feelings of love or your feelings of emotions are something that's very easily manipulatable, and it's manipulatable on a chemical foundation. So if I
that's
go
like my chocolate cake theory, how it's
well,
it's too abundant now, and so now it's actively harming us.
Why do you guys go through roid rage, right? Because you're putting synthetic testosterone in, and that's the output of you doing that. If I go and I flood your system with oxytocin, you go, oh, I love you, I want to touch you, feel you, or what is it like when you're on ecstasy or whatever the hell that other crap is now? It makes you touchy-feely and all that kind of stuff. Well, there are mood-altering drugs. I can change your emotion based on your physical state, or I can inspire a fight or flight adrenaline kick if I put the right stimulus in front of you.
The whole advertising industry is built on that concept that you can influence somebody's emotions.
Right. And so here's what I say. I say, okay, so emotions aren't magic. Emotions aren't like, shining light from heaven and it just feels so emotional and everything. That emotional,
but they're inputs and outputs, essentially.
They are, yes. And that's input, output, and you can trigger that by physical effects like drugs or environment or stimuli, whatever.
You
can change that. So here's what guys will say though. Now guys will say, well, those emotions are pointing towards a higher cosmic truth. They're pointing towards, like, your feeling of love. Like, love's the easiest one. So your feeling of love is pointing towards God is love. Like, God, love is such an important feeling to a human being that we're going to deify the feeling of love.
Oh, so they're talking about the God is in the gaps.
So so that emotional feeling, that emotional high that you get is a religious experience. So and
so not because they can't explain it, we're just going to throw God in front of it. Does that not sound a lot like the guys who just say, "Hey, Pergamy," and then wipe their hands of anything else?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. I hadn't thought of that until now. But like, and I hate to shit on him because I love him to death. I love him like a brother. But like when Goldman says, he did ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest, I'm not going to deny that he had some kind of very, meaningful experience by doing it. I've taken LSD myself, right? I maybe that's not what it is.
Rock star with LSD?
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. So. I understand that, but I also understand that it has a mood altering effect. It will make you hallucinate. And yeah, you might trigger that part of your brain, which we're studying right now, that will let a person have that religious experience. Epileptics, by the way, epileptics, when they go into their epileptic seizure, it triggers that same part of the human brain that is associated with a religious experience. And so when epileptics, and they've done surveys of this, or I don't know, research on this anyways, where if they have a drug that will cure an epileptic, the epileptics won't take it, because they like the feeling of when they go into a seizure, because it's sort of, in fact, even epileptic seizures back in our tribal past, if a guy was rolling on the ground and you didn't know what was going on, you thought he was possessed or he was having a religious experience, right? And so we take these very physical, very concrete, very, empirical experiences, or the way that our bodies work, or our concepts of God, are really based on
gaps in knowledge,
gaps in knowledge, but also on feelings that we know damn well. I know ayahuasca is going to make me feel like I'm seeing God, right? I know that's going to happen. So if that's your thing, then that's that. I can see why like peyote is part of a religious ceremony or something.
Yeah. Well, think about the Mormon religion. There's a reason that they ban all mind altering substance from it. It's because the church wants to be the sole arbitrator of like emotional resonance, I guess, is the lack of a better word. They literally want the church to be the only way you're getting that godlike experience. They don't want booze doing that, or coffee, or anything else. And it's really clever, because let's face it, as far as religions go, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, out of your fourth book, Mormons are probably the ones with the least amount of thottery to have to deal with right now.
Oh yeah, most definitely. Amish are probably number one, but they're
they're
right next. Yeah.
I'll do you one better. No coffee. I don't want electricity.
Yeah. Go build your own damn house. And here's the thing is a lot of people will listen to this and say, well, Rollo's he just doesn't believe it. No, I believe in God, dude. I have my own faith. I get it. But I also have to identify that there are things that we do to ourselves, or our only way of interpreting things is through the limited facilities that we have, like our sight, our smell, our taste, or whatever, and so I'm not against the idea that maybe there are forms of energy that are going on around us that we simply don't have the right organ to experience. So is that a possibility? Sure, it might be. Like, well, I can't see an infrared.
Well, yeah, we can't see it, we can't deal with it, and we have no way of measuring it. And then what are we even talking about it for? What are we going to be?
Yeah. So what can you So what can you use it for? Is as the next question. I like when guys will tell me, they'll say, well, that feeling of love points to a higher truth. Well, but then you can just again, that's a container word. You can just insert whatever you want to in that, and that opens up a whole nother thing. But like those guys, and this is part of book 4 right now. What we were talking about with Sean just a minute ago is when you get a guy who is very invested in his blue pill conditioning, and then you mix religion into that blue pill conditioning, that is a real tough nut to crack when you're trying to unplug somebody from the matrix.
Yeah, well, it's that pigeon experiment. Do you know the one where they had dispensers, they would release food at random times, and then they put pigeons in the cage, and they found out that pigeons were developing all these elaborate dances and superstitions that they thought would help them get food pellets better, when in reality it was just them inventing things in their head, because the thing was completely random. And I think to some extent that's what a lot of guys do, because they don't know, well, why did Karen take the kids? Why did she leave me? I had a good job. So if you appeal to energy, vibrations, God, and peyote, well then that's something, and you can't prove it as wrong. And if you did prove it as wrong, you would like hand wave it away by some other explanation, like, well, that peyote was a bad copy, it was just damaged peyote,
or she was not a quality girl.
And it's a self-delusion that reinforces and constantly. It's the same as like, and this is again, it's like cavemen. Well, put the sun in the west and whatever, Horus takes it in the east, but when this lunar eclipse, well, we make a new god, and you just keep inventing different explanations for things and adding to the complexity of it. And that's why I hate that glow ideology argument, or anybody who tries to make red pill more than it is, because all they're doing is adding complexity onto a system that's designed to be simple. Look at what's in front of you, act in a way that achieves a best possible outcome for you, repeat the results as best you can to ensure that it's something that's real and not just imagined or random. And then you start putting ideology in that, you're just adding that level of complexity. Him talking about Evola is no different than people talking about God and energy. The only difference is at least he works out. So thank God for that.
Well, that's and so that's why I think a lot of guys really have this kind of violent reaction to the red pill in some ways.
Well, yeah, they've built all that extra cannon.
Well, yeah. So like particularly religious people are very super religious people are very difficult to discuss. That's why I'm hoping I'm gonna that's why I wanted to talk to Abu American, because he seemed like he's down to earth, at least, at least I can have sort of a rational.
I think part of it too is he's like he's not talking about me. He's like, oh, that doesn't count with the Muslims. So talk about the Western stuff. I think he has that compartmentalization. I could be wrong.
Yeah. Crispy and Philly, thanks for that $10. But oh, by the way, for anybody who's still in the we have a lot of people in the chat. I will be getting to questions here, and if you want to hang out and help me with some of these, Ryan, that's fine.
Actually, you know what? I'm going to go for dinner.
You got to go. That's fine. I was going to say, if you got to go, you got to go. I don't want to keep you any further. I'll answer these the questions here.
Besides, they don't want to hear me. They want to hear you.
I will get to it. Yeah. So, do you have to go right now?
Oh, in a bit. Let's do one. Let's do one.
Okay. Well, I'll get to these. I wanted to talk to you about respect here for a second. Wait, where'd that go? I love this. Steve was talking shit about hypergamy just the other day. I'm glad Donovan kind of curbed him, but I think that a lot of these guys who have trouble with the aspects of things that I bring up or you bring up, or the nuts and bolts side of the red pill that is difficult for them to process. A lot of that comes from trying to, just what you said, reinforce their beliefs or come up with a new convenient way to kind of circumvent those new truths. Like we were saying before, our brains aren't really evolved to accept certain things or to interpret certain certain realities. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on with these guys. What I think what's going on with these guys
no, that's giving them far too much.
That's giving way too much credit. But what I'm saying is that I think that one of the reasons why we get into these debates like this, such as they are, or I've got Alexander Cortez saying, "Well, all you're talking about is hypergamy." Well, the reason that you get upset about that is because it conflicts the questions. Not even me just saying, "Oh, here's some evidence." I don't even have to be evidential. All I have to do is connect the wrong dots. And people will get upset about it because it conflicts with their existence. This is what they built their existence on.
See, and again, you're far more generous than me. I assume that's a branding thing.
I'm sure
it's the weirdest thing. So you've put in work,
but it works for them. They can get behind it because of that. So
yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. But that's what I don't get. You're the only guy. He's always acting like he's levitating above everybody. But as soon as you chime in, he's like, "Fuck you, Rollo." And I just gotta laugh at that. Come on, Chad. You can handle a 50-year-old man.
I mean, but the problem is that you get these guys, and that's another layer to all of this. If you've got guys who are very deeply in their existence is really dependent on the blue pill, and then that is dependent on their religious interpretation of the blue pill. And then you got Rollo Tomassi comes in and says, no, that or I don't even have to refute it. I just say, have you thought about this? And people will lose their minds. Like I said, I have to sort of preface things when it comes to religious experiences like peyote or ayahuasca, because I know how invested those guys are in that experience.
Yeah, and I can't injury. Is what you're doing.
Yeah, I can't tell them you didn't have a religious experience, because they did. They had it. Like I said, I've been on LSD before. I understand why it's so significant to people with understanding myself and seeing the cosmic truth of the universe. I just reading comic books when I was tripping. That was that was cool to me. But you can't if you're not gonna. I'm not gonna convince them. I'm not gonna convince anybody with a empirical argument.
No, it's a narcissistic injury. That's why you get narcissistic rage in return. It's like you said, they have a narrative built up, and all of these God of the Gap stuff is just narcissistic fuel to fulfill and I use the term a lot, narcissistic fantasy. So I have my story, I'm the main character, everything else is an archetype or a set piece. That's how you get damaged women as an archetype. There's no nuance to it. She's just damaged because she doesn't fit into what I have as quality woman in my little stage play. And then when you come in and you go against that narrative, it creates an injury, to which point the ego investment causes a rage. It's not anger. Anger is like a social thing. It's like if you stub your toe, you're hurt. If somebody stubs your toe, you're angry at them. So there's
Mhm.
like a grievance attachment to it, but rage is different. That's like a
Mhm.
2-year-old. They just have no control over their limbs. It's just rage.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
noticed that's the thing you're getting. And that's why it
mhm.
was you, I think, asked in 2000, I want to say 2017. Or no, it was Tanner. He asked, is it possible to be proactive with this? And I don't think it is, because
Mhm.
this only comes when somebody has had a trauma strong enough to break through and create that narcissistic injury. So then it's not projected onto you offering advice.
Mhm.
It becomes something that increases neuroplasticity. Your brain realizes something is not working. I need to start looking and build a new set of mental models. And that's when you can triage and actually have somebody understand some red pilled stuff, because they're
Mhm.
only open to it then. And I've never seen an example to the contrary.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the disadvantages of like unplugging guys, is because they have to be going through a traumatic experience to get them to the point where you can actually say, have you thought about this? And they'll actually think about it. They'll
Yeah.
actually get past that, because those barriers, like if you're living a good life and you're saying, you know what, maybe the reason you're living a good life is because of A, B, and C, you're not going to convince that guy of anything. But if that guy is having a problem and he needs to solve that problem, and you say, well, maybe A, B, and C are the solution to your problem,
Yeah, then
then that
listen.
guy might have something to say about that.
And that's another reason it's not an ideology, because if Super Chad is happy living life to the fullest and never has to deal with this stuff, then whatever, think what you want.
Well, I want to make this useful to people who are watching this, and guys in the chat here, is like, I always get this. I get guys who will say, why is it so hard to unplug guys? I read your book. It saved my life. I had a gun in my mouth. I took it out. I live a better life. My dad is heading down the same path, or my brother's about to marry this woman who's just horrible for her. And I see all of these things, but I can't convince him. I can't just give him he won't take the book. He won't read the book.
He needs to learn it the hard way.
This. And so this right here, what you and I have been just discussing for the last like 10 minutes here, this is why it is difficult for that. This is why you meet that resistance, because the conditioning is too much, but also you might mix a belief set. You might mix ego investments in that conditioning that they are literally dependent on. Like, I joke about this all the time. Like you're not going to convince a guy like Pat Stedman or these other dudes who are making a living off of what their beliefs are. I got into, do you know who Kate Bollock is? Have you ever?
Never heard of her. Oh, by the way, Donald Hoffman is that guy you were talking about with the evolutionary argument against reality.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Good. So Kate Bollock was this writer. She wrote this book called Spinster. She wrote another. She was supposed to have.
I'm a fan of her already.
Yeah. Well, you wouldn't be. She's very pro-feminist, very, but she wrote this book called Spinster, and her whole kind of grift was being single at like 40 years old, and how difficult it is, and like writing to an audience of women who are going through the same thing that she was going through. And so they
sounds
women
like a coping strategy.
Yeah, they eat it up, right? And I said, I was telling guys back as far back as like 2012, I said, she's her own worst enemy, because if she's successful and she finds a guy and she marries that guy, then her whole grift is gone, because now she can't really write from experience anymore, because she's no longer a spinster.
The Roosh paradox.
So she has to stay in that misery, in what she would like to say is, I say misery, that problem that she has can't be solved, because if it is ever solved, then would ruin the grift, and then she's wrong. And I see a lot of guys in the purple pill side of things, and of course Sean didn't throw that one out there, but he was saying that, as if I was going to say, oh, you're just purple pill for thinking that. I don't throw out the term purple pill just willy-nilly. I use it. I don't think
he meant you. I think he meant a lot of the low tier guys that just use the catchphrases.
Yeah, I think you're right too.
I like giving him credit on that. He's smart enough that way. He knows you're not an idiot.
Yeah, he gets it well enough. I had when we were there in 2018, I had a conversation with Sean about, he said, don't you think that some guys need the blue pill? Like, they need some sort of fantasy or some sort of hope that the blue pill gives them in order to keep them alive, to keep them going. And this is actually the thing I was going to talk about with Stefan Molyneux and Stefan Woodward, when they were talking about universally preferable behavior, one of the questions that was put to, I think both of them, was if you had the truth and that truth was going to be something that would be damaging to that guy, would you let that guy persist in his ignorance because it was what was keeping him alive?
Steph Molyneux had this argument?
Well, no, it was put on Steph Woodward from Rationality Rules.
Oh, because I was going to say they should know better, because what's the Roman saying? I can't remember it in Latin, but it's truth and let whatever happens happens. So if these guys are talking about like the West and all these moral high ground things, when they really need to do their own research, because that's exactly what our society is kind of built on. Truth, and then whatever happens happens.
Right. And I think that is kind of the question that a lot of these guys, that's certainly the question that Sean was putting to me like last year, is if you know the truth, do you have an obligation to tell that truth, even if that truth is dangerous to the person who you're telling it to?
Oh, and you know the best part of that? If you ask a girl that, if your husband was cheating on you, would you want me to tell you? And everybody would say, tell her. Flip it around, they will keep the secret from the guy. So we already know that that's like a loaded question.
And they will form like online forums to help you better keep that secret. Yeah. But so what's the obligation? And I wrote about this back in May, like right around the Patriarchs Convention, when I was writing about false positives, because I saw this happening real time. I saw what was going on, and it's like, should I keep my mouth shut and let these guys persist in their fantasies, or should I offer up like my observation that ruins those fantasies, and in doing so might have a deleterious effect on their business, or have a bit, or be bad for their family life? One of the reasons why a lot of guys don't like what you and I have to say is because it shines a light or highlights the decisions that a lot of these guys have already made, and they're stuck in that. Like I said, their existence, their marriages, their jobs,
their identity,
their families, their identity is all dependent on that blue pill conditioned fantasy being true. So they will they said, of course, this was straight out of
in any other field. Like if somebody had cancer, would you want to tell them, or would you want to not burden them before they die? Like what other field or sphere of influence is that even remotely a good question to ask? No doctor would say that. Everybody's like, yeah, no, if he has a cancer diagnosis, tell him. I think the only time it doesn't, again, anytime it's anti-woman or pro-man. Canada had this. There was a while back where they had a bunch of doctors, it was in Maclean's, talking about if during the course of your normal medical duties you found out that the father was not the father of the children, would you inform them? To which doctors got together and made an ethical decision to say no, because that would cause damage to the family. Imagine that. If you go in because you want to get a blood test, or if your child needs a bone marrow transplant, and they're doing tests and they found out you're not the dad, they have decided to be obliged not to tell you.
Yeah.
So we already know
because it's
how
what's
answered.
Well, and the way that they'll frame that is they'll say it's in the best interest of the child.
Yeah.
Not so the best interest of, really what they're saying is it's in the best interest of the woman, because the child will suffer for the decisions that the woman has made if the guy actually knows the truth of what had happened. Or that's the worry, that's the concern, right?
Which implies that they know that if a guy is not the paternal father, that's a problem to the guy. So all this whole step up, marry the single mom thing, like everybody knows that's bullshit. Everybody, because we actually have organizations and social institutions designed to prevent that outcome. So then when you hear people talk out the other side of their mouth and saying, oh, whoever's the dad is who's the dad, just step up. Like, no, even you don't believe that. Not really.
That's the war on paternity, right? The like everything that you just described, like wanting to, like telling the man that the kid is not his, will rationalize that by saying it's because it's in the best interest of the child, when really the latent purpose of that is it's in the best interest of the mother. And so what we're saying is the child and the mother's interests
are intertwined.
Are intertwined, but they supersede a man's evolved need to know paternity.
And then people have the balls to say that it's a man's children. Like everything there is designed to say it's her kids. You're just there.
Yes.
You sire children.
So here's the thing. When I go and I say, when I bring that up, I say, look, we live in a gynocentric social order. Here's why. And we use this as an example, just one of many illustrations. Putting that out there for the guys who are married single mothers, that's difficult for them.
Socrates.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Little
Socrates
allergies.
And Steve and a lot the dean and all these other guys who married single mothers are
somebody was even saying Robert Glover. That hurt my feelings to hear that about him.
They don't want to hear that they are cuckolds or that they're retroactive cuckolds.
Which answers Sean's question before, like, do you guys need the lie? Well, clearly there's a cadre of guys who will fight to keep the lie. They want the lie.
Yeah, because do you remember that part in The Matrix where the woman in the red dress was right there? And, And Morpheus was saying to Neo, he says, all the people in here are the same people that we're trying in the Matrix. Are the people we're trying to unplug, and they're going about their lives, but they are so dependent on the system that they will fight you to stay plugged in.
Yeah, it takes a lot of mental power to change things. So people would prefer just to fight to have everything stay the same.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they become, what do you say? They become so inured. He's very poetic as a monologue form, but it's true because you can have the best intentions to want to unplug guys, and guys will always say, well, why is it so difficult? I want to save my dad. I want to save my best friend. I want to save my brother.
Yeah, but he doesn't want it.
But their brother is dependent on the system. And that's why it's difficult, and that's why I think it's almost dangerous to unplug guys. Remember the allegory of the cave where the guy goes?
Yeah, Plato's cave.
Plato's cave. So you're familiar with that thing. You know what? A lot of people don't remember about that story is that the guy who actually makes it out of the cave sees the light and comes back in to tell the people.
Oh yeah,
they kill the guy. Yeah, that's how that story ends. He dies. so if you're like the light bringer, the illuminator, just understand they probably want to kill you.
Yeah. Well, let's face it. That's how come half the brands that steal your stuff, they're telling guys what they want to hear, because they know it's a more lucrative industry to sue the guy to give him a coping strategy than it is to actually solve the problem.
It's easier to be purple pill because it's better for business that way. It's easier to just go halfway.
And again, that's the only sphere of influence where that's true. Could you imagine if law was built on lawyers making you feel better about losing in a court case?
Mm-hmm.
It wouldn't have lasted. Doctors, just give them some leeches. No, they actually want to help and fix.
Yeah.
For some reason, sexual relations is the only place where there's like an anti-Hippocratic oath, and everybody seems to be okay with it. Again, big head theory. Because sperm is cheap and eggs are expensive.
Man, that was such a good. I think I might even like reblog that post by Whisper because that was really good. It's very succinct and it will piss off a lot of people. It'll piss off the right people. Let's just put it that way.
Oh yeah.
Sam Whiskey here says, "Hey Rollo, is religion blue pill?" I've answered this like several times on on my religion and the red pill posts, but I don't think I've ever had you on here with this. I think a lot of people want to say that religion is part of blue pill conditioning, and I would separate the two. I think that when you combine religion and spiritual beliefs, and particularly very well impression, like really strong religious impressions on somebody, and it doesn't have to be a religion, it could be like a religious experience like ayahuasca or whatever, and you combine that with this blue pill conditioning of like energy and vibrations and love languages and MBTI and numerology and all. When you go and you combine blue pill with that, that's a dangerous combination. I think that it depends on the religion, and I think it depends on the person. I think it's a lot more subjective because I would say that it certainly has a potential. I'd say a lot of modern religion right now, particularly amongst evangelical circles, is very, very much blue pill because it's been combined with that secular influence of blue pill conditioning and then rewritten into, it's like been interwoven, I guess, with...
I'll do you one better. I'll make a World War II reference because we haven't had a Nazi reference in a while. Is Hitler's car fascist? I think that's how I think of religion. Keeping in mind, I'm the guy who named my dog Christopher Hitchens, so, pretty sure where I stand. Yeah, is his car fascist? Well, it drove him around, so it must be. I think that's the same mechanism of religion, because that was if you read Old Testament to New Testament, what used to be honor killings and smiting of the Samaritans turned the other cheek, turned into man up and marry them hoes.
Yeah,
it's really just a vehicle, and whatever social attributes we want to attach to it will be there.
You really, really, really need to read Alpha God.
Probably.
Because there is and I pointed this out actually from the very beginning of book 4, well, when I'm writing book 4, is that I notice a difference between the nature of God in the Old Testament versus the one that's in the New Testament. Like I point this out, and I'm still on the fence about this, but it's my opinion that I think that the Old Testament God was much more masculine, much more like in your face, like I'll fuck shit up, that kind of stuff. Like that's that kind of like you're fearful of the God of the Old Testament because he could kill you in an instant. Like, well, one of the guys, it's in that book. It's in Alpha God. He charts how many deaths God, the Abrahamic God, is responsible for just in the Bible alone, and it's something
more
like,
than RoboCop.
It's like 46 million deaths. And then he compares that with the deaths that the devil, like Satan, Lucifer, is responsible for in the Bible, and it's like 60, like directly responsible for.
Well, and people think of angels as these nice cuddly things. Last I checked, those were God's hitmen.
Yeah.
I need this guy murdered. Get down there, and that was the whole purpose of it.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't appear as a pillar of fire for pacifistic reasoning. But yeah, I always I thought of this, and I kind of had it a little bit confirmed in that book, but not entirely. It seems to me like that book is like the Old Testament is much more masculine than the New Testament. New Testament is very much compassion and love and forgiveness and yeah, does
accepting
Jesus
of suffering. I think it's you can tell it's been built around the time that the Roman polytheism was rampant there. So it kind of involved the playing meek, biding your time, building strength in numbers, that kind of slave mentality, which Nietzsche talked about. Suffer what you must and be noble in your suffering. The aristocratic of the original aristocrat of the soul.
Yeah, because things will get better for you in the afterlife. Yeah, and I think that's why in feminization of these religions, I think that's why, but at least with Christianity, that's why women focus on just that aspect, like the New Testament, and then the parts of it that fit in, maybe a little bit from the Psalms, just whatever works for women, kind of thing.
And that's what I get too.
It's
if
like
people are
pick
just
and
gonna
pull.
piecemeal the parts of the Bible they want, why not just do like handle thoughterly the same way any normal secular guy does, and then just add the rest of religious stuff to make you feel good? Why do you have to always accept the stuff that puts you 1 foot behind in the race? The one where you have to be a virgin until marriage, but then marry up that whore of Babylon. Like there's something about it, and it's more than the Bible. It's that, I think you said it was what was it about beta males? They want the plow horse nobility thing. Or, correct me, I'm fudging it here. I'll just use the thing of Milan, that the weak suffer as they must and the strong do as they can. But it seems that women have co-opted that for a certain amount of strength in the sexual marketplace, and guys are using their nobility plow horse mentalities to suffer as they must.
As I'm writing this, I'm actually kind of glad it's taken this long, because I'm becoming more aware of
that makes the one guy in this chat that thinks that.
Yeah. Because it's given me time to sort of consider other things. Like, I didn't know up until recently that Tulsi Gabbard was a Krishna. And so yeah, she's a Krishna. And I started looking into Krishnaism, I guess that's the proper term. And it is very appealing to Western women right now, is Krishnaism, because it doesn't
like how they love yoga and
it doesn't come along with all of the baggage that Christianity does. So like, they can still have all the feel good emotionalism of Christianity, but we don't have to worry about a wrathful God that's going to tell us we're sluts.
Yeah, well, that's because, like, for Buddhism, that's why yoga was so popular here, because Buddhists from like Thailand were the ones coming here preaching Buddhism. Guys who use it as a marketing thing to bring it over here did that. And you're right, they cherry pick the stuff that appeals to women, yoga pants, chai lattes, that whole stuff, and women ate it up because it was designed for them. It's their version of the Norman Rockwell paintings.
Oh, they love
where guys
it.
are looking at that, or Oh, that's what dads should be. The guy
I've-
wearing the fedora that's got a doting wife and kids. It's all advertising, and it's all
I've been looking
manipulative.
at and I've talked about this with Sam Bada before. As I'm writing this book, I'm looking at how feminism and the feminine imperative works its way into like mainstream religions, and I'm not talking about orthodoxy. Yeah, okay, I agree. There's orthodoxy, I get it, but I'm just saying, like in mainstream religions, that the Mick religions, that women will get themselves into, it is almost always like converted to serve their purpose or whatever it is that they're going through at that particular time.
They're the ones that tithe.
Well, they are the primary consumers in Western cultures. But like one of the reasons why Christianity and really Christianism as well is so appealing to women is because it's based on that forgiveness, and that's why I said there's a difference between the Old Testament, like primarily masculine, and the New Testament, which I'm not saying there isn't masculine sides of it, but it's more feminine and it's more forgiveness and compassion.
Oh, the guy Jesus drank wine. How cool could that have been? He's a cool wine ant.
Yeah. Well,
Nana, come on, that's just
there's a whole nother story about that too. And so that forgiveness aspect is very appealing to women when they get to their epiphany phase or when they become single mothers. Somebody just sent me, and I wish I forget who, hat tip to whoever did this. They sent me this video on this Christian women's ministry that is specifically designed. They have a convention for single mothers in ministry.
Well, who's babysitting the kids?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, but I think that one of the reasons why that aspect of those religions is appealing to women is because it absolves them of any responsibilities for the things that they like. Again, the things, the evolved influences, the motivations that put them in that position that we would otherwise call sin, they want some sort of absolution from that. And
they are what Pat Stedman and Mark Manson and Tucker Max aspire to be.
Mm-hmm.
They're just better at it.
Yes. Yes. All right, man. We're gosh, what are we at? We're at 2:10 right now.
2:10. This has been a blast. Wasn't there some questions too?
This is good. Yeah. Let me whip through these questions really quick here. We're gonna do the lightning round. Let's see.
If it's about a girl and it's been less than 12 months, the answer is next.
Next. Yes.
Handled 80% of your questions right there.
Okay. So Alex Julian Yoga says, thank you so much for what you do. Respect to Ryan and Pat as well. Great. Thank you. Thanks, Disco God, 25 Canadian dollars. He must have known you were on. Gentleman went to a Catholic conference yesterday. Lots of pushing how to be a man, be vulnerable, put other people first, respect women, toxic masculinity, etc. Lord help us. Thanks for the great work you guys do. Yeah, I mean I've one of the reasons I got into doing book 4 about religion is because it is being assimilated and redesigned to fit the feminine imperative. And I had this conversation with Sam Bada, and it's my opinion at this stage that if we're going to have a globalized sexual marketplace and a globalized economy, and we're going to just have open borders and everything's just going to be this globalized society, that also necessitates a globalized religion. Well, who's going to bring that? Who's going to usher in that religion? I would say it's probably going to be women, because whenever women get into positions,
they're collectivist.
That too, yeah, of course. But whenever they get into positions of power within the church, the first thing they do is convert it to be a Unitarian, multicultural. They don't care about anything in the past. They only want to have inclusivity. The religion, the new religion that will be created by women, will be all about love. And it's all about tolerance and love and acceptance. And if you aren't,
and if everybody's on that same team, conscientiousness works great. But that's the problem, is that cartels never work.
Mm-hmm.
All it takes is a few people to cheat, and then it breaks down.
Yeah. Have you ever seen women try to organize things and stay on?
Dude, I deployed, and they put me on the watch that had the most women on it. And I remember as soon as work got busy, she just sat there and froze. And then the other one kept complaining about feminism the whole time. So my workload was insane. So I'll just leave it there. But you'll see my thoughts coming from that story. And I added a link to a post. These guys are going to like this guy about, You should put this bucket on your head right now. I suggest that guy reads it.
Mhm.
It'll kind of give him an understanding as to
Oh, okay, I see.
the whole phenomenon.
Right on.
It's neat. It's just for that same, when somebody's trying to convince you of something and you're not sure if he's right or not, like, why would you want to listen to it? And that he puts that in that reference of his little Catholic convention. I think it'll give him a chuckle.
It'll help you. Alex R 499 says, "Here's my Sunday donation for my red pill cult leader. Thank you." Namaste.
Oh yeah, I'm your black friend too. I keep forgetting that.
Yeah, you are. Yeah,
not hard R black, but soft R.
Yeah. Okay, so Yolo says, "Hi Rollo, you mentioned last week a test women do where they put a guy in a difficult situation. Flex, fight with another guy." Oh, I think what you're referring to is, and this is another one that's in my drafts folder right now, is Let's You and Him Fight. Are you familiar with Let's You and Him Fight?
Oh, well, I'm from a redneck town. Of course I am. My boyfriend would kick your ass. She's flexing, using you as her plow horse. It's like that Frank Frazetta. Who's the other artist? Why am I drawing a blank right now? Every painting is D&D, oiled up people, heavy metal magazine.
Oh, Boris Vallejo, yeah.
Yeah, Boris Vallejo.
Boris
the
Vallejo.
One where there's always the girl in a bikini with a giant beast underneath her? That's that archetype.
Yeah. Yeah, Let's You and Him Fight is actually a post I've got in my drafts right now. What that is it's almost like a dangerous shit test for guys. It's women wanting to convince themselves that they are with a guy who actually has a capacity for violence or has a capacity to defend her, and so she will go and start shit with either other
people with it.
She bullies people, yeah. So she will start shit with other women. Or and I think this has gotten a lot worse in recent times because
they do.
Because there's this entitlement that women have to their own security. And so when a woman escalates an inherently unsafe, circumstance, it's usually done because she feels like she's actually safe. And then of course just add alcohol and you get a worse situation. So you see women like, pushing, punching on the, poking at the guy and maybe even hitting the guy, knowing that the dude's is never going to hit her back, is never going to do anything. And if he does, then there's going to be like 6 other guys are going to jump on his ass as soon as he does.
Do you want to know how to deflect that as the boyfriend being told to go fight for her honor? Tell the guy you can hit her once. And then just leave it there. I'm from a redneck town. I've seen this where deflates the girl's ego right away. She'll get mad at the guy, but it's like instantly that guy is no longer getting in a fight with some Chad.
So so YOLO, that is called Let's You and Him Fight. That was actually picked up on by pickup artists way back in the day. So Yabba Dabba Doo, whatever this guy's name is here, says $5. He says, "The best marriages I know, the women I met late teens or early 20s, the girls called all in, pragmatic, inductive, her best, or bachelor mode." I got no idea what
I think he's trying to talk about, like, find a nice virgin girl and marry her young.
Yeah, like
that's the best.
Well, here's the thing: it's statistically
impossible.
Impossible, but it's statistically wrong because the younger a couple gets married is associated with a higher incidence of divorce. So I know that I get why people would want to say that. I had I don't know if you were around for this one, but I had a guy ask me. He was like 32 or 33 years old, and he said, I want to find a woman. I want to settle down. I want to have kids. I'm thinking now maybe the time for some monogamy, but I don't want to get with a 21, 22, 23-year-old girl because they're all in their party years and they're all just party girls. And he says, but I don't
want a good virgin girl that's not a lot of upkeep.
Right. Well, then he would say, but I also don't want a woman who's in her epiphany phase. So she's already all used up. And I think wholesome was the word he was using. And so I said, why don't you look for a girl who, I said, you're not going to find a virgin. Okay, let's just, I mean, unless you unless you want to convert to Islam, unless you're going to convert to Islam, then you're not going to find a virgin, not in Western civilization. And even then you might not.
I've spent some time in like Oman and Dubai. There's ways around it. The anything but Catholic type thing amplified.
Right. So I told him, I said, look, you need to look for a woman who is somewhere like after the party years, like maybe 25 to 27. Look for that sweet spot right there. And don't, look for the best, but don't expect, absolute perfection. And then I sort of use the the terminology that Tate was saying is that, you know, you don't build a race car with just from scratch. You actually have to find a good chassis and find a good, model to build up from. And I hope that answered the guy's question. But yeah, I understand. Like these guys,
he wants bubble wrapped life is what he wants. That's the problem. And he's thinking, if I can follow this, and that's why I talked before about that checklist. Don't give the guy a checklist. If you're a girl's best option, she will act right.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if she's had 1 cocks or 100. I follow a girl on Twitter, actually, no URL, Danny. Exactly what you would think of as the kind of girl a guy doesn't want to be with. And she's doing exactly what my little sister did. She found the first man who stood up to her and said no. And she melted into his arms, and she's extremely loyal to him, even though she has that thoughterry. It's not a pair bonding thing. It's this guy's my best option, so I'm going to start acting right.
With it. Yep.
And so when you're looking for this virginal 17-year-old or whatever crap it is, a guy's like, I want life to set me up for success that way, as opposed to having to earn it the hard way by being the kind of guy that a girl will give up her thoughterry for. My girl, to some extent, has done that. I mean, yours probably too. She was a nurse, so I know she partied.
Well,
nurses were hard.
She was a medical professional. Yeah. Yes.
So I guarantee you, as soon as she found, hey, this is the Rollo Tomassi, she started acting right. She probably stopped going out. If she did drugs before, she probably stopped it because she knew you probably wouldn't want it, and she just started acting right. And I think that's the part the guys miss when they start asking about all these narcissistic fantasies. How can I make this archetype work for me? Like, no.
We talked about, I don't know if you were a part of that conversation, but I talked about this with Donovan. Donovan has pointed out that if a woman is into a guy, she will start adopting his behaviors, his mannerisms. She'll start liking the same kind of food. She'll start, sports team. She'll listen to the same kind of music as he does.
That's like Lacey Green. Do you remember her?
Yeah, I do.
Sex positive feminist, found a good man. All of a sudden, she's like, "Hey, red pill, am I right?
I'm red pilled." Yeah.
All it took was a good dick, and that's it. You could solve feminism tomorrow with just a certain amount of guys who really like girls and pixie cuts with bad attitudes.
I think that okay. So here's the counter side to that. I think a lot of guys get a little bent because, like, if they're one of these guys that women see as sort of a beta in waiting. And they're their best option, and they start like behaving in a different way because they know that they got to hook up with this guy because that's their last chance for like a successful family. Those guys don't want to be that. They want to be the first choice as opposed to the necessary choice.
Well, see, that's the thing. They didn't earn it. They just are offered it. That's the flip side of the 17-year-old virginal bride who's never had a dick. That's exactly the same thing, but on the other side, they don't want to earn it. They don't want to have it. They want it to be offered to them, but they don't want it to be offered to them because the girl's obliged to. That's no different too than Sean's thing about what if you rip off her face and you find out she's just a robot. Yeah, well, a girl needs you. That's why they're thinking you're the best option, but you just want it to be for a reason that you can live with. And that's fine. If you want a girl that's 17 with less than 3 cocks under her to find you attractive, well, go see what those girls are after right now. If you can't compete at that level, then you're not going to get those kind of girls. So you either need to change your expectations or change the workload you put in and your availability to those women to make it more likely it's going to happen. And that's why it's a praxeology, not an ideology.
Right.
If you said yourself, what was it you said to them? 27-year-olds?
25 to 27, somewhere in there.
Young enough to be useful, old enough to be somewhat wise, a little bit of experience, but not jaded to the world. Well, where do those girls go, and what kind of guys are those ones into? Be that, and you guarantee they'll start falling all over you. There's that burden of performance again, and it's not authentically me. Well, you are what you do. That's like saying if I go work out, that's not authentically the pudgy bastard me that eats Cheetos all day.
All right, I got Disco Gods. He fronted me 25 Canadian dollars. Thank you.
I can't help but think they're doing this to like poke at you.
I know, to mess with you. Dr. Jones gave me $5. He says, "Can anyone on red pilled diocese speak diocese like diocese speak to attachment styles, both secure and insecure? Within insecure, you have anxious and avoidant." I've actually written about this. If you go and you look up on my site, it's called SMV and attachment, or SMV ratios and attachment. I wrote about this a while. I think it might even be in my 3rd book as well. I might have put that one in there.
Yeah, I think I got one from 2.
When I talk about attachment, from a red pill perspective, it's usually based on sexual market value evaluation between the couple. A stronger, more secure attachment is almost always going to be where the woman believes that the guy is at least one step above herself in sexual market value. So what do guys say? What do you think guys, what's the first thing out of guys' mouth? Well, I got to go for a girl who's like ugly. I got to go for a girl who's one step below me in sexual market value to have a good, successful marriage. No.
Well, if you're a
dumbass.
7, 6s don't look too bad. It's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing is it's perceptual. Okay. It's like, what does she think of you? We were just talking a minute ago. How is it that these women are loyal to these guys who are just dumbasses? Or who are, we see this imbalance in their sexual market value, and she just totally thinks he's the best guy in the world, and she can, he can abuse her and she'll keep coming back. Why does that work? Well, because her perception is that he is the best that she can do. That's the perceptual balance right there. So can you have a strong emotional attachment with a woman who thinks that you are one step above her? Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would say when you get into higher levels, that's when it gets more dangerous. If a woman thinks that she is one step above you in sexual market value, watch out.
Yep.
If she thinks she's 2 steps above you, you're on. She's just having you around. You're probably an orbiter.
Exactly. And here I added it into the chat too. Is like fearful avoidant wives. There's a couple guys in the Married Red Pill who've been talking about it. I've been reading it. I don't quite buy it, but it's outside of my experience, so I don't have enough to go on. Mm-hmm. It'll be a nice thing to get you started there too. I don't like it in the sense that I don't like saying BPD is real. Mm-hmm. Guys love using that as an excuse to absolve themselves of sin. So yeah, no, there's some stuff there. Read it if you want to, but if you're assuming your wife's fearful avoidant or whatever, then you're probably just lying to yourself to feel better about it. That's my thought.
Yeah, well, I definitely read my essay on sexual market value and ratios with regard to attachment. Just type in like SMV ratio in the search engine. I'm sure it'll pop up. Yeah. Let's see. I got 2 more here. Carl Bennington says, I have a 2 payment and question. Please scroll to second question as well. Alpha here, 33 years old, 21-year-old, contacted me after 2 years. She stole my car twice and cell phone.
I can already tell the answer to this question is block.
What? Now, why is she stealing your car, dude? Carl Bennington. Okay, here it says, this is the same dude? I don't know if this is the same dude. Carl Bennington says, Carl Bennington paid $9.99. He said, here's his question. Alpha here, 23. Okay, so, I told her, there's more to this, who I had spoken to for almost 2 years contacted me. I told her I was greatness. And then she stole my car twice and cell phone. So twice? I egged her car for stealing my shit. She contacted all the girls I know on my Facebook. Now all her and her other girls blocked me on all social media. Is there a medium to this message? Or a message to this medium, I think is what he means.
Is he fucking with me?
I'm not sure what they're saying. They want to chase after them. I have no idea what this guy's on about.
Dude. Are
you 12 years old?
The first time she steals your car, that's it. The second time, and then your decision was, you know what I need to do? I need to defend my honor by egging her car. That has got to be the most. And I don't mean to crap on this guy because he's probably one of your followers and he did do a super chat, but he needs to hear this. If your first thought is to get a revenge fantasy on some thought who treated you wrong because you let her, first time, steals the car, fine. The second time, that's on you, man. Mm-hmm. You put up with this stuff because she was either good in bed or you didn't think you could do better. And so that's on you. That egging the car was you soothing your own ego. And the fact that all of her friends saw that you were acting unattractive, right or wrong, girls don't like guys doing things bad to women. So they see that as an unattractive display of value, and they'll block your ass, and they will automatically take her side.
PBR saying it must be a troll. I think it's a troll too, but
I hope it's a troll.
33 years old and you're egging girls' cars, dude. Really?
Yeah, really? TP it. That's what real men do.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna move on.
How much did you pay for that troll?
$9.99, man.
Fair enough.
So I said, last one here, and this is the last one. Rollo Tomassi, Love Island UK version is a pseudo testing ground for interpersonal dynamics via red pill lens. It's on Hulu. Totally worth a case study if you make allowances for its premise. Okay, so when I do case studies, like people have been asking me to do a case study on this new show on Showtime, and
So a
it's
case study on what the editors decided made
yeah,
a good
I
narrative.
know that. So like, and I've given Donovan shit for this because he will like sit there, and I don't know how he does it, but he'll sit there and watch like The Bachelorette. And I'm like, dude, you realize that there's too much money in this show for it not to be scripted. You know that, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, fine. Well, people want to say, well, this is just it's written in this way because this is like art imitating life.
It's visual 50 Shades of Grey. It's total fantasy. It's designed for people for an emotional resonance. You might as well do a Hypergamus talk about Rey and Star Wars. As for how useful it is.
But there is this one. I don't know about Love Island. I think Love Island is probably just like another one of these pseudo reality shows. But there is this one on Showtime that I am kind of halfway interested in because it is a somewhat realistic portrayal of a marriage counselor who has like couples come in there and they talk about their problems, and it's sort of it's about the couples, but it's also about the therapist as well and what she has to deal with and like what she's thinking of.
It's all about her.
Yeah, I know, right? It's all about the chick, and of course there's a gay couple, and then there's and it's interesting that the heterosexual couples, the guy is almost every one that I've seen thus far has been just completely cucked. Is like he turned into somebody I didn't know. No, he was always like that. You just didn't have the opportunity. You had no other options at the time. So I can dig into that. I really want to do case studies on that show on Showtime, but I'm a little concerned about copyright infringements on that one. I don't know. Maybe I will. Maybe I might pull like bits and pieces out of that one because it is interesting in showing like the reason why guys like my case studies is because in real time I show guys like red pill concepts happening right there in real time. Yeah, so when I
mapped the territory.
Yeah, when you and I and everybody did that one sort of deconstruction of that guy Josh on who was talking about the problems with the red pill, and that was a really good case study because we could just sort of in real time pick them apart. I've done that with some relationship shows. I can't remember the name of them, but then I also did it for like Tech Lead and some of these other guys. I didn't want to do it with Josh Fluke because I like the kid and I wanted to make sure that he got to tell his story about all of that. But like, I really like Josh. I think he's cool. So I think he deserved a little bit of input in that as well. But yeah, I'll probably be doing some more case studies in the future.
Wow, guys love that stuff. I just hope they're not trying to live vicariously through this. Like, oh, thank God I'm not this guy, the Jerry Springer appeal. And I hope they're actually looking at that and realizing these models can help them in their relationships because these aren't uncommon situations that pop up.
Yeah. And I think they're useful. I think they're useful as just, if nothing else, like a map. Now, if they're scripted, if it's The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, then yeah, I'm not going to do a case study on that. Yeah. Sorry.
Let me do a case study on Conan the Barbarian, and here's how you can be alpha.
Yeah, or a romantic comedy. Yeah. Come on, man.
Be the Tom Hanks.
Here's the thing: is if you really want me to do a case study on like a romantic comedy or some like fictional thing, do it yourself. Most guys are doing it anyways with the red pill lens. They're going, I see why that is, or I don't know. But anyways, okay, I got to get out of here. We've been at it for 2.5 hours, which is way long for me. But thanks for joining me, man, and thanks for Rich, and thanks for Sean. You got anything coming up you want to plug real quick?
Dude, I honestly have like 5-6 videos a week plus the Patreon things. Just stick to the YouTube stuff and try and keep up. Because I can already tell the viewership and people can't keep up now.
Yeah, I know. I've been doing a lot of stuff myself, and I'm trying to actually take a step back from this and Twitter. Troy sort of gave me an idea to do a Twitter diet because I need to focus on all of this stuff over here.
Have you seen I even stopped following you guys because I'm like, I can call you on the phone if I had to, but my Twitter following list is done, and I don't fall for any BS anymore.
Yeah,
unless I actually go looking for it.
I occasionally will get drawn into stuff just because I find it entertaining. If I find it entertaining, maybe I'll do it. But
yeah, but that's only the big stuff now that finds their way to me. Like if you or Carl does something, I only find out about it if it's that big that at least 3 or 4 people that I used to follow are still looking at it.
Oh wait, we missed one here. It says Davey Furtado says opinions on guys on their 20s moving out from parents' house versus staying in there to save money and get a mortgage.
Move out of your parents' house.
Why? Yeah, why are you there anyways? I understand why guys want to stay in their parents' house, but it does you no favors.
Yeah.
So
it takes you an extra 2 years to buy your first mortgage. That's good. That's 2 years you could spend running game.
It's
or possibly earning more
that
money.
too. That too. And the other thing is if you're living on your own, you will learn to live by yourself. And I think that is a very undervalued experience for guys. Is a lot of guys don't ever. Maybe they'll be on their own in university or something, but they're really not. I mean, you're still in a dorm situation. Like, be on your own, man. Learn. There's things that only living alone can teach you. So
even logistics, you have a better chance bringing a girl home when your wife lives there than when your mom lives there.
It's true. And at least you got your own place.
Unless you want to be an incel, don't live with your mom. That's just. I can't believe you even get that as a question.
If I had and I hate to sound this way. My daughter, fortunately, is very, very independent, and she's done. She's out. She's on her own. She's doing her own thing. It's not because I kicked her out or anything. In fact, I would be okay if she decided she wanted to come back. But you need to develop the desire to be independent, and you won't do that if you're still, living with mom and dad.
I think dad being the best friend of their kids is doing them a disservice.
Yeah.
At least in my life. I remember I hated my stepdad so much that like 17, I was out.
Yeah.
I don't want to be around you a minute more than I have to. Best thing he could have ever done for me.
Yeah. All right, guys. On Wednesday, I will be with Abu American. We're going to be doing that at a special time. I think we're going to be doing it at 10 a.m. Pacific. So it might be like 2 p.m. Eastern. So look at this channel. If you haven't subbed, please sub. Also go over to Ryan's and sub for him, because you're at what, 6,700 right now, or 6,500?
Am I? Oh, that's awesome. I was like,
I just cleared. Oh yeah, I didn't say this. I just cleared 30,000 subscribers on this. Thank you very much for all of you guys subscribing. That means a lot to me, especially in 1 year's time.
Dude, they spot talent. You've already outdone these guys that have been around for 7 years reading your book in their Honda Civics.
I'm glad. Yeah. Well,
as you should be.
Thank you guys for subscribing. And also, the best way to support this channel is to copy and paste that URL and put it in your Twitter feed or on your blog or wherever else. Good reviews, 5-star reviews are always appreciated. And if you want to donate to the show, in the description is where all my donation stuff is to keep us going. And then again, Abu American Wednesday. Don't forget, that's going to be a good one. I don't know what's going on for Friday as far as the Pat Campbell show is concerned. We might be off because of the holiday. We are going through Thanksgiving as of Thursday, but we will be back for Rule Zero on Saturday at the regular time, 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. So with that said, thanks, Ryan. I appreciate you joining me today, and we'll see you next week.
Been a blast. Catch you later.
Guys.